All right, well, I am back. Yeah, I know. Missed a little bit of time there, but Christmas and New Year's was more Christmassy and New Year'sy than it was last year, having some cause for hope. And I've got fascinating guests. Please feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Don the Pleb, and I don't know, don't go with fascinating. I might have to do something interesting.
All right, we'll see. We'll see. The day is young.
Well, something is, but it's probably not me. I'm a giant boomer. Just ask the internet, they'll tell you.
There you go. There you go. Well, these things happen. They certainly do. So you can find Don at Helo Procurement on Twitter and everywhere except Facebook. Much like you can find me at that fake guy Dan, also everywhere except Facebook because it's just incredibly weird and robot lizards are just very strange. So I don't like to keep their company.
Accurate. On the upside, though, algorithms are improving. We got Smile 2.0 a couple of months ago. Now we're getting a metaverse.
Oh,
It's going to be great.
oh yeah, super super good times. I did actually get somebody to throw in with me on backing a Kickstarter for a VR headset, so I am actually kind of hyped for that. Not meta at all. As a matter of fact,
No,
I won't be getting an Oculus because, again, fuck Facebook. Those people are just too weird. Like
well,
they want to know too much.
I have good news for you. At the rate that we're going, you're going to have, oh man, now I forgot the name of the movie. The Stallone movie from the future.
Oh,
Um,
Running Man.
no. Wow. Okay, we're gonna skip over that because that is now a dead joke. I've killed it.
It happens. It happens. Not all jokes can go on to live a long and fruitful life.
Okay, now that I have said I killed it, Demolition Man.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Okay, that's a quality
and
flick.
you can have crazy VR sex real soon.
Yeah, that sounds exciting.
That's one way to put it.
Right, yeah, and I'm sure I'll be an ace at using the seashells too, right?
Yep. I mean, I'm interested to learn, even if I'll never use them.
Well, I've seen an infographic and it still doesn't make sense. So I'll just leave it at that and let your imagination run wild. So speaking of wild imaginations, this is one that we covered on the podcast some while ago when it was fresh, and well, it's come back up again. So recently, the suspects, shall we say, in the Whitmer kidnapping plot, shall we say, they've they're saying what we all kind of thought that the FBI, being 13 of the 18 members of the group, might have had some kind of hand in forming some of the decision making process.
At this point, we should say at least 13 members of the 18 members.
Fair, fair, yes. Yeah, and that was at their peak, actually. So, I mean, I think some people dipped out because they're like, man, you guys are Fed posted a little bit too hard. I'm having to wear my sunglasses around you because you're a little bright.
Definitely happened. There, one of the first guys they arrested was like, "I've been out of that group for 2 years because you guys Fed posted all the time."
Yeah, isn't that peculiar? So, the guys they're asking for the charges to be dismissed, they're saying the FBI invented the conspiracy and funded and agitated the whole thing. So, yeah, isn't that funny?
Well, I for one am just shocked. The high quality, definitively trustworthy people at the FBI would simply never do this thing except for all the other times they've done it.
Well, there was this fella. You've probably heard of him. He said something about shattering him to 1,000 pieces and scattering it to the wind, and then he drove his convertible around Dallas, and
Yeah,
uh, and that was the story of that fella.
I hear they opened his mind on the subject, and he kind of gave up.
It was definitely a brain expanding experience, to be sure. To be sure. And then that case got really got closed, and recently we got a bit of a drip out of that, which had a lot more information than it should have.
I was so excited for a minute there when they were like, "Oh, that's it. This year we're gonna release all the files," and I was like, "Oh man, it's gonna be a fun year." And they only released like what a quarter or a half or something. Oh man.
Yeah, it's It's always something. They're never going to give us the full story, but one of the most peculiar notes of that whole drop, which is right along the lines of the Finder's drop that they had in the other vault dump. What was that, like 2 years ago? When it's like, oh yeah, no, the Finders, yeah, they had tunnels under a school with satanic imagery, and they were doing all the stuff that was, that they were just saying was a satanic panic,
Yeah, so every single thing, and I mean all of them, every single thing anybody ever said, like, no matter how crazy it was, no matter how much your uncle with his tinfoil hat in the basement was like, I'm telling you, man, it's the demons and they're touching the children. Basically, that drop was just like, no, crazy Uncle Bob was underestimating what he was talking about. That's all we're saying.
Yeah. I mean, we can just look at what happened in the more recent past and in Trump's time of the compound out in New Mexico. They were training kids to be jihadis, and then they find it, demolish it within 2 days.
Right. We accidentally bulldozed it before we got any evidence out of it. Mistakes happen, man.
Yeah, it's something else, man. It's really something else. The whole shut it down thing really rings true sometimes.
Seriously, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I'm old enough to remember when this was just a joke and it was all peak conspiracy craziness and blah blah blah. And now every time you turn around, it's like, you know what? This might look bad. It turns out that we just lost 200,000 documents from a certain guy who didn't kill himself. Just oops. Oh, and none of it got entered into evidence.
Yeah.
And no, we're not going to publish his client list. Why do you ask?
Well, I mean, the court itself. Who's the head of that court? Something. Comey. Yeah, her name's Comey. I wonder if she's related to the other Comey. Oh, his daughter.
Just a mighty coincidence. Who knew?
That's pure coincidence, obviously. So this Comey lady, she thought that it would be wise to hide this from the public. That was too lewd and lascivious for public consumption, obviously.
Clearly, also sponsored by Pornhub.
Oh, as you do. And just to clarify here, if you do go reading up on the article out of Michigan, I am not the Dan who infiltrated the group. I'm Evan. I'm a fake Dan, not a real Dan. I'm a real Evan. Just want you to all know that.
See, this is the kind of thing, by the way, that is going to get me to change the Twitter handle to things like Real Fake Dawn.
Hey, there you go. I'm gonna have to make my backup at one of these points because I figure they'll probably come for me, so I'll have to be the real guy Evan or something.
Oh man, that's coming. I mean,
I've made it since 2014 without a single ban, so I don't know. Skirting my luck, I guess. I don't know. Either that or I know exactly how to do this.
Yeah, apparently. I need to go take lessons from you.
You got to skirt the line just so, and you never fly too close to the sun.
Yeah, see, right as they changed the rules a couple years back, I used the forbidden R word on Twitter and was algorithmically banned.
Oh, I won't say I'm not shadow banned. Well, that's another matter entirely. Yeah, my reach is definitely cut down. I'm gonna say 2016, right around the end of 2016, like my organic growth totally stopped. And everything I've gotten since then has just been a battle. At one point, I was just at about 3,000 followers, and now I regularly sit like between 25 and 2,600 because of purges and everything else.
Yep, I know the feeling.
But that's Twitter.
It's part of the reason when you were like, "So, where can I find you on the internet?" I was like, "I don't know. I got to change all of it like now."
Fair enough. And I'll your assistant has gotten back in touch with me, and I will be including all the links for anybody that would like to follow up in the description below, wherever that below happens to be. If you're checking this out on YouTube, Anchor, Odyssey, whatever. By the by, very big fan of Odyssey. I'm liking them. They remind me of YouTube 10 years ago.
Mm. So
So,
that is looking like the good and the bad to me of YouTube 10 years ago, um, because I, I have an Odyssey channel. There are things over there that I broadcast, and then I had a handful of people call me up one day and go, "Just so you know, I just got banned from Odyssey," and I was like, "Great, well, so we're doing this again."
well, yeah, it's best to be everywhere. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm on BitChute too. I thought
Yep.
about Rumble, but I just don't like their terms of service. They're a little bit too draconian for me. I mean, they fall along the lines of like a Facebook, just in kind of the different direction.
It's there is this weird scale, right, where the more you're allowed to say, the worse the site is. Like
Well,
I
that's
love I love the BitChute guys to death for what they will let me host there. On the other hand, I hate the BitChute website with a white hot rage.
it's uh, it's something. I will say I've been on Minds for about forever since it came out, and I think that it is legitimately the best social media in existence today, and it's half dead.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, they've got the perfect formula. Interface is great. Terms of service are great. Monetization even great. Everything about it hits all the bells and whistles, but they just don't have that terminal momentum that a thing like Gab does because Andrew Torba is a an absolutely bombastic personality.
Yeah. That helps a lot. Also, I think mine suffers from being early to the game, right? When mines came out, I was sitting in my living room like that week, devising what it would take to do something like mines, because for the same reason that Bill Ottman was like, "This is starting to look bad." I was looking at what was going on with social media and was like, "All right, well, somebody better do something." And then he made mines, and a whole bunch of people started CCing their content over there, and nobody moved. Right? There was never a mass purge where everybody suddenly went over to mines. There was no,
Yeah, there
um,
wasn't that imperative that we really
right,
got when Patreon, happened basically.
right.
Which I'm sure any listener now is going to get what I'm talking about when I say when Patreon happened. The whole Sargon and others thing.
Oh yeah, the mass bans and all that kind of stuff, and mines just barely missed it on all of them. Right? There was always some other new platform that was coming out right as the bans happened, and mines was never the one. Right? It was already in existence, and people, um, you know, though I will say they screwed themselves a lot because there was a while there where I was trying to build out mines, and they kept changing how long your video content could be and be up there. And so for like one week I'd be able to publish there, and the next week I couldn't. And I was like, guys, you got to stop this.
Yeah, that's gonna. You need hard, fast rules that you can work with.
Yeah.
That's just kind of a given. If you don't have
Yeah.
a system, well, I mean, look at YouTube and
Yeah.
how everything's just kind of fallen apart since they've become just completely capricious with their rules. You
Indeed.
can't. You can't build a future there unless you're building something that would be safe on cable television. And even then, you can't do that because Fox News is allowed on cable television, and OANN actually has a channel
Yeah.
that doesn't get banned from cable. So,
Well, I mean, like Crowder, who was originally a radio show, regularly, I mean, currently banned off YouTube. I-
yeah, another great example. There's,
Yeah.
and I mean, the guy's not even really all that extreme. I, I kind of get where they got him originally a couple years back for quoting the journo that liked using acerbic words, shall we say, to describe himself. And
I mean,
it's like, yeah, you're quoting him, and yeah, that's actually fine, but we
well, we don't
exist in a
like you.
paradigm where you don't get to have the same rules as everyone else.
Indeed. That said, autistic complaints about various social media aside, I'm sure there's something more important to talk about because let's face it, if you don't create content, you're mostly just irritated when all the rest of us get banned.
Yeah, true enough. True enough. So, well, I guess next topic. As a matter of fact, another one out of the Daily Mail on this one, the Fauci email leak, the most recent one, where we find out that he just basically tried to smear everybody behind the Barrington Declaration. Did you had you caught that one?
Uh, Remind me.
Okay,
Because this is another thing where every time I turn around with this guy, it doesn't matter what he said. Like if that guy came out tomorrow and was like the Earth is round, I'd be like, shit, we better check with the flat earthers,
right. Well, I mean, he's been killing people since the late '80s.
right?
Sorry, he's been aiding in the deaths of innocent people since the '80s. I don't want to be called out here for that because
Excuse me, fact check. There is no evidence that Fauci ate babies on Main Street in New York.
right, right, right. No, I was in a bathhouse. But anyway, yeah, he's he's been called out for years, and somehow he's managed to maintain not being the villain, despite literally being the villain. It's
Oh man,
it's something
uh,
else.
what is Dallas Buyers Club? I am enjoying this meme circulating because it is big lefty happiness, right? You know, like oh my god, people wouldn't let you buy effective and safe AIDS drugs. You know who the bad guy was in that? Anthony Fauci. I, deal with it.
Yeah, that's a little thing that people forget. Like, what was it? Much like the you don't need to wear a mask. You don't need to wear a mask. Well, hold on. Maybe you should wear a mask. Actually, no, you shouldn't just wear a mask. You should wear two masks. You gotta wear two masks. Okay, well the science doesn't support two masks, so just wear one mask.
Also, maybe three.
And then, oh yeah, now I know we've been saying this whole time that cloth masks work. Okay, I know that we've been saying that this whole time. All right, but listen, okay, cloth masks don't work.
If it's not KN95, then you're wasting your time. You know what is amazing about this is that this guy lies so ridiculously that when the mask thing started and it was don't wear a mask, I was like, well, I'm not gonna wear a mask anyway. But if you're gonna tell me that masks are useless, right? They're not. They do some things. They don't do what all of you want them to do. They don't instantly stop the transmission of everything, but they do collect some things out of your breath, right? Which is why you shouldn't, reuse disposable masks and all that other kind of nonsense, right? And everybody was like, "Don, you're just being a dumbass, man. Like, that's just how it is." And then we swapped to, "Oh, you totally have to wear a mask." And I was like, "Look, I just went over this. Yes, it will collect some. No, you shouldn't be reusing them. They're really not particularly amazingly effective in doing what all of you people want them to do." And I just got called a contrarian. I was like, I haven't changed my stance on this at all in 2 years. And guess what? No matter what it is that they end up saying, because there was somebody way back at the beginning who was like, "Oh, we should be wearing like NBC gas masks straight out of the military." And I was like, "Well, if you want to wear that, it will do a lot of stuff. I'll grant you that."
It'll work. It'll absolutely work. They're about $40 a fucking filter, but they'll work.
Right, yeah, a couple $100 for the mask too.
Yeah, well, you can get them for less than that, but
Oh no. Well, it was we need to go get the new ones that at the time were still relatively young, so the military was buying all of them.
True.
But and on and on it goes, and somehow or another, it doesn't matter how long this goes on, how much the rules change, even if you just stick with what literally all of us knew 5 years ago, you're just a contrarian.
Well, never mind that 5 years ago, the literal definition of vaccine was something that provides a sterilizing immunity to a disease or affliction, and now it's something that basically, according to the current definition of vaccine, a Tylenol pill is basically a vaccine.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
I
if
mean,
we want to be purely strict about their newest literal definition of what a vaccine is and does, I mean, Tylenol, it takes down inflammation, kills your fever, eases pain. That's about what the vaccine's doing with the newest strains.
right? I mean, you got basically every over-the-counter medicine for the past. I mean, the Omicron booster is literally NyQuil. Like well, here's what Omicron does, and the vaccine just makes it slightly better. And it is literally the list of things that NyQuil treats.
Pretty much. And I mean, they haven't even there isn't a new vaccine. Everything's built for the wild type and the alpha type, period.
Yeah. Well, don't let that get in the way.
And
It,
that's an interesting point. I've brought this up with my co-host, but I imagine you'll probably get a kick out of this little comparison. So Anthony, he said, "I am the science. I am the face of science. I'm the voice of science." I don't know his exact terminologies, but basically, like, I am science with a capital S.
yeah, it was when the people are attacking me, they're attacking the science.
Ah, yes, yes, exactly. So it being the voice and name of science, being a PhD, he is a doctor. He does officially know his stuff. He's going to know the right terminology. So, as I've been saying here, alpha type, wild type, or alpha strain and wild strain. These are the two official, legit lexicon based terms. Like, this is what you would have it. This is what somebody in the field is going to call them. Now, he said the Wuhan type. Now, if he's the voice of science and he knows this terminology, why would he use a different term than literally every single person in the immunological field? Is that what they called it at the lab? Is that why you called it the Wuhan type? I wonder,
No. Look, China has just seized the means of naming,
Oh,
and
there you go.
you're all going to have to get over that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, since we're on this little Fauci kick, so the email, let me see here. I'll just read it directly out to you. It's from Francis Collins to Anthony Fauci. Hi, Tony and Cliff. See http://gbdeclaration.org. This proposal from 3 fringe epidemiologists who met with the secretary seems to be getting a lot of attention, and even a co-signature from Nobel Prize winner Mike Levitt at Stanford. Needs to be a quick and devastating published takedown of its premises. I don't see anything like that online yet. Is it underway? Francis. So there's this is ugly stuff, man. This is really ugly stuff.
Well, I think the ugliest thing that we've got thus far is that the guy who is the science is taking advice from a guy named Francis.
In this day and age, that could be a red flag.
I can't. I wanna take this stuff seriously on occasion, but I'm running out of capability too, right? I've spent a lot of years being like, so the people who are doing this are the worst people on earth, and 2 or 3 years ago, I used to get you're a crazy conspiracy theorist lunatic, and then these emails leak, and people are like, man, conspiracy theorists are just 6 months ahead of the news, and I'm like, hey, remember 2 years ago?
Oh yeah,
And
not only that too. I mean, it turns out they were putting stuff in the water that was turning the frogs gay.
right?
Of all
And
the
it's
things.
I mean, I want to. I'd love to be outraged about this, but I am. I don't know. I'm just out of gas on the subject, right?
Well,
You
yeah, I
know.
mean, so much of it comes by. You go from outrage to just nonplussed. It's like, oh, so the sky's still blue. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, this Fauci is eating dog's face off with what are those things?
Tsetse
Those
flies
stupid
or
white.
something?
Yeah, I I want to say that's surprising, but
Yeah,
you know,
hardly anything is anymore. I mean, we've seen pretty much the depths of depravity and seen that censored by Comey's daughter,
right?
literally.
And it just it, how how long are we gonna sit around and pretend like this guy who will so overtly lie about everything, and make no mistake, let's say for a minute that we believe all of a sudden that you should wear a mask everywhere, right? Which is what we're supposed to do.
Oh
So
yeah, of course.
Susan, if this hits YouTube, of course we are listening and believing, all right? But let's say we believe that. The premise of that is that this guy came out and was like, "Hey, so we could totally sacrifice a few 100,000 people as long as we can protect masks for doctors," and then like that, by any other definition, would be genocide. So I don't know what it is that's not that, but then we're supposed to be surprised that this guy does other stuff, and I'm just like, look, if he is at any point told the truth, he's a genocidal maniac. And that's just true.
Well, we can just take his work in the 80s and 90s and make these statements, and they still fit.
Exactly.
That's without even getting up to the modern era of how many lives he's cost with COVID.
Exactly. And there's no point in this guy's career that is documented where he doesn't act like a genocidal maniac. And so, like, oh man, people. Well, let's see here. The proposal from 3 fringe epidemiologists. Okay, so fringe, we're already into the propaganda term. Um, who met with the secretary seems to be getting a lot of attention. Yes. The problem is, of course, never whether or not these things are true. It is whether or not they're mainstream, because that is the complaint that he's made. And so we're going to need to, as we determine what mainstream is, we're going to need to get rid of you because we've decided that you aren't mainstream.
Well, but
I
don't you
mean,
know, 9 out of 10 doctors enjoy the smooth, toasted flavor of a Camel cigarette.
well, you're goddamn right they do, and they were right to do so.
I mean, Fred Flintstone. Now that said, Fred Flintstone told me that 9 out of 10 doctors prefer a Winston cigarette. So, I mean, who am I to believe? Am I to
Indeed.
believe Joe Camel, who makes smoking look ever so cool, or am I to believe Fred Flintstone, the wholesome, caveman home? Well, he's not the homemaker. That's Wilma and Betty, but you know,
Yeah. But
breadwinner.
he is.
There we go.
There we are. See, I was fighting for that term too. Whew. You believe we talk on the regular where people listen to us?
It, it is alleged.
This is anyway. This thing, we want to get excited about. I mean, look, if people got all upset at Trump because he was like, oh, I could shoot somebody on I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose any voters. And Fauci's out there like literally shooting people on Fifth Avenue. Like, Trump is terrible. He's the worst person ever.
Yeah, he's got the real that real Big Brother vibe of stop hitting yourself. As he
Yeah.
slams your face with your own hands.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I should say, stop hitting yourself. Come on, you gotta stop hitting yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, if we're gonna do that. Speaking of hitting yourself, the other topic that I brought up for the very beginning of this, the concentration camp bill for New York. It goes up for a vote tomorrow. Let's get excited.
I thought what's his face said he was pulling this bill. The guy that wrote it.
I'll have
Wasn't
to
that what
check.
he was going on this big uh, media tour talking? Oh, the right wing is being evil and telling us, telling people that this is about concentration camps. So I was just gonna remove it from a vote.
All right. Well, I've got an update from. Huh. Oh, I hate Google ever so much. Oh, they do not not like me finding these.
They're very hateful.
Um, PolitiFact. Yeah, I false. Let's see. Let's see. Why does PolitiFact state that this bill is false? New York is trying to pass a bill that would, quote unquote, allow them to round up non-mask wearers and people who don't want to take the vaccine into concentration camps. Then, with a court order, they can force vaccinate you. So, most of that is probably true. Let's see if we can decipher which part is untrue. Okay.
Well, at no point when they put you in this definitely non-camp will they make you concentrate on anything. Therefore, it's not a concentration camp. Checkmate you.
Actually, we've got it even better. We've got it even better than that. The bill in question, A416, is not new. This isn't a new bill. This wasn't just introduced. Obviously, it's false. Was first introduced in 2015 during the Ebola outbreak and hasn't gained any traction. So this isn't new. This has been here the whole time. I don't know why you're making a big deal about it. It has no co-sponsors, never once been heard in committee despite being introduced in 15 and 16, 17, 18, and 19, 20 sessions and the current sections. Uh-huh. I that's
have
adorable.
Really great news. Dachau has been on planet Earth since like 39, so there's nothing to worry about there.
Well, yeah, I mean, Poland's been a country for quite some while. I mean, train tracks. We've been using trains for forever. What are you so worried about getting on a train for? Jeez, people,
People panicking about nothing.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the video out of Germany literally this morning of the police beating somebody in a bus and then pulling the curtains on the damn bus.
Well, look, if you can't trust the police in Germany, of all places, to beat people on a bus, who can you trust?
Well, I would hope that they've got some kind of experience in that.
You would think, right? Like some tradition to hand down, one might say. I'm sure that the German police beating people on buses is been refined quite a bit over 80 or 90-ish years at this point.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Just
and if
random time scale there.
If there's been a group of people beating people, doing anything really for 90 years, you have to assume they know what they're doing. Just the institutional knowledge has got to be pretty good.
Well, yeah, I mean, you had the change in management there for a while, but you look at East Berlin, and I'll tell you what, they knew a thing or two about beating people.
See, that's another thing. Not only do they have great institutional knowledge, they have been, interlacing themselves into other institutions that have been doing this for a long time. They've got a very diversified experience set. Now, look, that's long-term institutional knowledge, diversified across lots of institutions from lots of places. There's got to be some wisdom here. They just, you have to assume.
Oh yeah, if not the genetically inherited type, a practical kind.
Exactly, right? Certainly, these people have forgotten more about beating people on buses than you and I will ever know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Rosa Parks she'd turn red just to imagine it.
Well, then she might have a peace pipe.
I actually, believe it or not, I have a right to be offended at that. Not going to be, because I literally give no fucks. Because I'm pretty much willing to hand out red man passes to everybody. But, just saying.
Well, luckily, I don't have any right now. But on any other day, I might be able to pick some up and chew it. So I'd be square. Have some red man in my mouth. And that sounds like reparations to me.
It could. I mean, as long as you're not doing it in a, well, it wouldn't be buck breaking, would it? In a buffalo breaking sort of way. Should be fine. Should be fine. So, yeah, the long and short is they're saying that the concentration camp bill isn't a concentration camp bill because this has been around forever. Never mind that it's actually going up to vote and it's never gone up for a vote before. It's never had any kind of traction like that. So, I mean, they're their whole spiel is basically built on a foundation of sand, if you will.
Well, I mean,
But it's Snopes, right? It's
yeah.
PolitiFact.
I was gonna say, this is. I used to years and years ago. I'd have friends be like, "Oh man, you should go check Snopes for this stuff," and I'm like, "Did you actually read the article?" Right? Because I know, yeah, you found the little, the number of Pinocchios, the little truth meter, right? And you looked at that, but did you read what it said? Because I feel like you didn't.
Yeah, more often than not, a headline's quite enough for some people.
Oh yeah.
And that in and of itself is incredibly dangerous, especially with the yellow journalism that is just absolutely rampant in all media today.
Oh, it's not even a joke. The New York Times is probably the best example of this. They notoriously, basically every headline is headline, first and second paragraph are supporting. Somewhere after the eighth paragraph is, oh, by the way, everything we've written up till now is BS.
Yeah, this was entirely an editorial article and not based in fact at all. Based on the observations of a homeless man on the corner of 8th and 23rd.
Who we gave some LSD to before we talked to him.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then showed him a picture of Trump, just so that they would say he was extra evil.
Oh yeah, he looked at it and didn't immediately vomit, so we know that he's apparently a Nazi.
Clearly.
Clearly.
There was no running, yelling, screaming, vomiting. Heads didn't spin, so clearly Nazi.
Oh, absolutely. It's surprising no one.
Oh, man. I wish that was exaggeration, right? But it used to be a long time. Satire is so dead. Because it used to be.
Anytime you see satire now, you have to ask: Is this a headline?
Oh man. So Poe's Law is so ridiculously bad now. In fact, somebody just today forwarded me a meme of 4chan being like, guys, I can no longer tell the difference between propaganda and our shit posting attempts.
Well, you want to know something crazy? I was running on an old computer for quite a while, and I built this new one right as the pandemic was starting to hit, and I got a chance to play GTA 5. So I played GTA 5 in the current era, and I can see where they're making jokes, but they're not jokes anymore. It's like reading old Onion articles about things that have actually happened. So it's like,
oh yeah,
oh, I see you put a funny spin on this thing that I'm actually living through literally today.
Oh, see, and now the poor Babylon Bee is dealing with it on a pretty regular basis. Like, sorry, we're retracting this article. We accidentally published real news.
Yeah, it's so bad that they had to create Not the Bee.
Oh yeah, and
it's and the headlines are just as insane and nonsensical, except they're completely real.
Exactly, and oh man, not too long ago. Just a couple weeks ago, and this is getting to be the problem, right? Because it used to be, it'd take the Babylon Bee a couple of months, and then they'd have to retract something because it actually happened. And now it's just getting way too close, right? The Babylon Bees over there, like I think it was the AOC says everyone, people's only real problem with her is that they want to have sex with her or something, and then it was like 2 weeks later, Republicans are just mad because they want to date me. I was like, that's it.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that statement. That's one of the most infuriating things I have ever heard a politician say. I mean, being honest, if she were interested, I would say no. Now, I'm not going to put that into the words I've used to discuss it with my peoples in real life and not online, because even in the more permissive places where this is going to go up, I would probably catch a lot of hell. So let's just say, not interested. Not interested.
I hear a wood chipper.
No, not. it's not a not interested to that point. It's more of a, I wouldn't piss on you if you're on fire kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I it
But
she
that up to
is
about an 11,
yeah. She is I can't imagine anybody hasn't heard, don't stick it in crazy. And
right?
there were a bunch of people when she showed up who were like, "Well, you know, if we got to listen to her talk, at least she's kind of hot." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no,
That
no."
fucking dance video.
Ready? Yep.
That fucking dance video. That shit got her so many votes.
It did. And that by itself, I mean, whew, uh,
Sandy, Sandy, Sandy.
yeah, it's it,
Fucking thirst
that
trap,
that
man.
was that was the idiocracy moment, the serious one for me. Like we've been headed there for a sweet hot minute, and then it was she dances on a roof in a tight shirt, so we're gonna vote for her. And I was like, President Camacho approves. That's it. We're there. We're done.
Yeah, just about. Just about. Things are very clowny. Very clowny these days.
Oh yeah, it's getting exciting in a really horrifically terrible kind of way.
Oh yeah, yeah it is. I mean, it's all gas, no brakes. No brakes on this train.
And that right there, all gas, no brakes. That's enough. I'm sure we are now both banned off of all social media.
I have no idea if I referenced a thing that is or is not real in saying that. That was entirely a constructed statement of my own, referencing nothing.
Oh, I wish that's how it worked.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty good about not saying the magic words, so we should be okay. And
Oh,
these generally run long form enough that one or two inconvenient things are able to slip through.
well, good news. Soon we will no longer have to worry about being banned off social media, as New York, just momentarily ago we were discussing, is demonstrating. Soon we will all be in the non-concentrating camps.
Well, there's a lot of things that you need to think hard on, and what better place to do that than a camp built specifically to help you concentrate? I mean, they're doing it in Australia. We're seeing how well that's working. I mean, they had those two young fellas that, they didn't actually, they weren't diagnosed with anything that required concentration. As a matter of fact, they had tested as not having any concentration-worthy afflictions. And nonetheless, they were kindly retrieved from the place that they left and returned there gently, as it were.
Exactly, right? And look, this is really just a massive self-help thing. Right? Like, who couldn't use a few months to spend some time working on their failings as a human being? And that's really all that New York is trying to do here for you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're actually trying to set up groups, in a chamber, with like 5 points, kind of star shaped, where these people can, have they can struggle, in a session, like have a kind of some kind of session where they can struggle with their faults, as it were,
You,
confront
you
them.
could you could call it group therapy.
You could, a way of thinking as a group, even, a group thinking chamber in a star shaped chamber, perhaps. I mean, what do I know? I'm not an authority on these sort of things. I don't even live in New York.
You know what we should do is we should ask Fauci.
Well, he would know. I mean, he knows all about New York. Not to mention all the bathhouses that you can find.
Exactly. Not to mention that he is the science.
Well, he is
So,
the face of it,
um,
the
yeah, well,
voice.
realistically, we we should just we should just get rid of the metaphor here, and we should just start calling him Jesus. The science has
Well,
spoken.
let's be fair. Jesus isn't specifically scientific, so we could call him Science Jesus.
We could. Though we're probably gonna want to have some sort of like a diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of thing going on here. So we might have to call him the Science Jesus.
Maybe, maybe. I guess we'll have to leave that to more educated scientific minds.
Indeed. You know what would be great though is if he could just carve into some stone, like 10 rules that we could follow.
Well, I'd say that he's actually drawing a lot of his rules from some stone inscriptions that already exist. Some
Really?
guide stones, perhaps. I think you can find them in Georgia.
That may be, but I think we're going to need him individually to, carry them out, and just wave them at people, right? Not even necessarily let anybody read them, just wave them at people.
Oh
Because
yeah, huh. Just go up on the
I
holy mountain, get his edicts, come back down, and tell us to destroy our idols and all that.
exactly right, and we have this thing that we commonly refer to as the hill, right? So he could just walk up that.
Yeah, I mean he's
Pretty
done it
good.
more than once already.
Indeed, right? He's got some experience, and as we know, experience is good. Covered that a couple times today.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely, absolutely. So we've well, actually, no. I do want to kind of cover Omicron just a little bit because lately it's
No.
something we've been going over, and it bears repeating. We got so lucky. There's no reason that this should have evolutionarily selected for all of these pressures. The way that this should have happened is maybe the end of this year, beginning middle of next, it should have naturally evolved itself into this, well, effectively, a real nasty cold or a not so bad flu. But it did it all at once. And it did some weird things. Now, we're still waiting on the hard and fast numbers, but it looks like we dodged a major bullet with this because what we've been saying this whole time here, even on this show as well as some others, that we're looking at a situation similar to the Spanish flu vaccination trials of the 70s, wherein those vaccines ended up aiding the flu itself, making it more dangerous and deadly. And that's exactly what has happened with Omicron.
Yeah.
But we got lucky. It selected for every other pressure that it shouldn't have. And so, instead of getting something that's incredibly dangerous and deadly, we get something that's incredibly infectious, 2 to 3 times more than the most infectious Delta strain, but largely well tolerated and low levels of lethality.
Well, this is so we got that because basically of where it came from. South Africa is not.
Actually,
Uh,
I have done some follow up on that. It was discovered as coming through South Africa. It looks like
yeah.
it's either from the Netherlands or Germany.
Ooh, see, that's interesting because
Well, that
that's.
that would explain why it would be vaccine aided and so vaccine evasive. It's in
Oh
a
yeah,
place that's it's just awash in vaccinated individuals.
in
So it's going to
indeed.
have to evolve to either avoid it or use it. That's
Yeah.
just a given. But then to select for all these other things, I've been saying in private with some friends, was there some like wealthy Eastern European dude who just said to some of his friends at one of those black labs to just, hey guys, we got to fix this? Who knows? Because it's so weird that's a question we can actually ask and not
Well,
sound like crazy assholes.
so it's not even then not terribly surprising, right? This is sort of like why isn't the world covered in Ebola? And the reason for that is basically that Ebola kills you way too fast.
Yeah.
Because if it had a latency period of a month, we'd all be screwed.
Yeah, Ebola actually, in the grand scheme of things, is not a very good at its job disease.
Right.
It's really good at killing you, but at being a disease, it's kind of terrible because it kills you too fast and it's too noticeable.
Indeed. Right. And so, you with all of the well games that we play, specifically over in Europe, right? Um, i- we probably never noticed any of the really harsh stuff, and then we just threw somebody in an isolation tank and let them die, and then went, "Wow, it was Delta," right? Um, and
Literally possible.
it's all the asymptomatic stuff that makes for decent spread, right? That's always been the case. It's why cold and flu season is cold and flu season, because you can carry influenza as an active virus that is attacking your immune system for sometimes up to like a month before you even notice, and about half the time, for if you're in that healthy age range, which is also the era that you're working, it you get a stuffy nose and that's about it, and then you check your house for mold, and by the time you figure out what happened, your entire office is home with the flu, you know.
Sure enough. Sure enough.
And so it was always going to be, the more global outbreaks are always going to be more mild, because if they're really, it's the same problem as at the beginning of this, right? If and for those that don't remember, way back at the beginning, oh man, we know how terrible this is because it creates icicles in your lungs, and diamonds and blah, and there's like a 90% chance that that's going to happen. I was like, if any of
Oh
that was
yeah. What?
happening,
What?
this would be over in a minute.
Our initial thoughts were something like 30% lethality.
Yeah,
Now
and
that being
if
said, here's something that I haven't caught a whole lot of your stuff, so I mean, obviously, I don't know. We've only talked on Twitter.
sure,
But back in the early days, there was some distressing shit coming out of China and Wuhan specifically. Some very distressing stuff, like the mobile incinerators, the amount of pollution in the sky that should equate to hundreds of thousands of bodies being burned that just all of a
well,
sudden appeared, or better still, the 20 to 30 million cell phones in China that got turned off
turned off.
and
Yeah.
never turned on again.
Well, never turned on again is a long time frame, and I haven't checked, so I don't know. However, um, this is one of those things where it's even more meta than that, in my opinion, right?
Oh, there's so
Because
many questions we don't have the answers to.
right, China isn't exactly big on free speech,
Yeah,
we'll
and
say,
they're not entirely forthcoming on information either.
and there was just an endless supply of these videos for a while there. Where every 20 or 30 minutes there was a new video of something that happened on the streets of China after they had locked down Wuhan, after all these cell phones had been shut off, after they had turned off the internet in Wuhan, after they had put a cordon around the city. And I was like, so how's this stuff getting out? How, where is this coming from? And part of the other problem, and I again, I don't know, so I just ask, is that there are plenty of places in China, and realistically, I guess I should go back and look, where pollution is so bad that parks are basically giant biodomes with air scrubbers in them.
Oh, I've seen pictures of Beijing.
Yeah.
It's about as
And
good as it
so,
gets, and it gets bad in Beijing. It's as
right,
in general, Beijing is about as bad as late '90s LA.
exactly, right. And
Just in
this is the
general, like
shtick.
any given day.
Right. And this is the shtick, is like so much of this was stuff that, why would totalitarian government do totalitarian government things? I don't know. I can't think of a reason. You know,
Right?
equally speaking, was a lot of this is stuff that literally happens in China every day. And after that, I'm expected to believe that, the Great Firewall of China, which encompasses the whole country, is letting this stuff out. But even more than that, cities where they're just turning off the power grid for the whole city are getting out regular quantities of video. How is this happening? And nobody ever wanted to talk about it. And in the world of, China shuts off 30 million cell phones, um, is is that they just turned off a city's worth of cell phones, and then, you know, turn them off for a year, and then as soon as they decided this was all over, they turn them back on? Does anybody know? And we don't do any follow up on any of this kind of stuff. We don't. And I made it a personal rule not to talk about cooties too horribly much anymore, um, because way back at the beginning was, Dawn, we know all this stuff, and I went, well, you don't know any of that, right? But what we do know, where we can get data from, because you can't get data from China, right? Like
Not
their
trustworthy
government
data, at least.
publishes, right? Somebody the other day was publishing a thing that was like, deaths to COVID in 2021, 442,000 in the United States, 2 in China. And I was like, if you believe that, you're an idiot, right? like, maybe 400,000 is true. I have my doubts for a wide variety of reasons, but if you believe China was 2, you're an idiot, right? But,
So I've
you
got
know,
some good news. We
yeah,
have managed to acquire a co-host. Craig has made it to join us for the show.
welcome to the party. I mean, it's your show, so maybe you should, I don't know.
Hey,
It's
how's it
awkward
going?
now. Not bad, yourself?
Don, Craig,
Doing all right.
Don.
Hi, Don.
Well, hello there.
So as you
Uh,
can tell, we were just discussing the weird
Mhm.
numbers and early days out of Wuhan.
Okay.
so, um, anyhow, the problem is that we other things that came out of there, right? Like I specifically referenced the diamonds in your lung thing because this was supposed to be the hard line of we know. Has anyone even talked about that? Like, does it exist anymore? Is there anyone who is being like, oh yeah, man, so we autopsied this guy, and it turns out we now have a thing that can cut diamonds because it came out of his chest from COVID. I mean, it was just an absolute lie, and we just ignore this because reasons, right? And Italy was a real similar thing. Um, way back at the beginning when they were publishing data, their health, secretary of health or whatever that guy's name, title is over there, comes out and goes, well, we're really liberal with how we describe COVID deaths. We're marking anyone who dies with a positive COVID test as having died from COVID. And yes, we know there's a 50 to 80% false positive rate. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is all bullshit.
Yeah, that's something we've actually covered to a fair degree. Like the this fella out of New York, I believe, that was found in his car, shot to death, and of course that was well, he was with COVID, so you'll have those
Right?
sort of issues.
Indeed, but it's it's been this way all the way along, and it, everyone wanted to get caught up in the fear porn of it. And I was like, just relax, guys. Like, if any of this was true, we would have confirmation from somewhere else, specifically when it was mostly just Chinese nonsense. Um, but when they were the video that pissed everybody off or scared everybody was them walking through the streets with disinfectant gas
Oh yeah,
masks
yeah,
on,
yeah, with the backpacks and the big sprayer things. Yeah, I remember that.
right? And everybody was like, "Why
That
would they
was ominous.
possibly do that?" Yeah, right. Okay, exactly right. If that was happening in, uh, I don't know, Tennessee, right? And there was a disease in Tennessee, and this was, I don't know, 91, right? And we locked down the entire city. We're like, oh my god, it's basically the zombie apocalypse in I don't know, Knoxville, right? Everybody would rightly be losing their mind. Now, why would the guys who are literally organ harvesting the subpopulation they don't like lock down an entire city and spray it down with disinfectant? Because they felt like it.
Well, I wouldn't put something like that past him. Being
Indeed.
fair.
But I see. This is why I stopped myself talking about fucking COVID too much because it just uh, it's funny in retrospect, but oh my god, people were losing their. I mean, all these people, and there are many, tons of people. I was super early on, like how the seventh lockdown was bad, and I'm like, I was telling people not to panic when you were screaming to lock down the whole country. In fact, the whole world. Shut up.
Excuse me. Yeah. No, there's been a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth for Well, only I thought I could have sworn I turned that thing off. Son of a bitch. There we go. Problem solved. Anyway, yeah.
Thanks for ruining the whole interview, Evan.
I know. That's what I do. That's what I'm here for. So anyway,
That was it. This was the smoothest thing ever. No one had made any mistakes up until that moment.
Damn.
That's because I'm here.
Thanks, Craig.
I must have butt texted him from some other person's phone.
There we go.
All right, now let me completely turn off that so that it only vibrates in the future. There we go. Problem solved again.
Oh, that's just self-congratulatory there, pal.
Right.
I'm not putting it in my pocket. Anyway.
He didn't say he wasn't sliding it down the front of his pants. Just throwing that out there.
Also not doing that. It's staying on the desk.
I mean, you focused off a lot on where you're not putting it, not where you are putting it.
Fair enough. It's over there on the desk, by God. Yeah, so we've covered a lot of everything. We got to Omicron, which is something I was really keen to cover. And I don't think you were here, but we did actually talk a little bit about the New York concentration camp bill.
Just showed up.
Yeah, that's actually getting voted on tomorrow, so we're going to want to follow up on that one later on, maybe the weekend or something.
Well, never again means never again, but fuck it, I guess.
Right? Yeah, it's funny how quickly people forget. It's like they think that work makes you free or something.
Well, it does, right? I mean,
that's what the sign says.
Exactly. And furthermore, again, as we discussed previously, this is just to help you concentrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I could use that. I've got ADD.
Right?
See?
Yeah, I mean, how many people are on the spectrum these days? Yeah. We got what? 1 in 8 people on the spectrum. It's just called for. It's a natural thing. That's why they did it in Australia.
Exactly.
That was about a 1 in 110, but we'll go with that.
Is it a one?
Yeah. Look, it's 2022. By now, I think we all know that 97% of statistics are made up on the spot.
I think that most people that do come into that nowadays are just going to be self-diagnosed with their own pronouns for it. So don't mind me throwing out a stat from basic memory.
Oh yeah,
3 years ago.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, we've thrown basic science out the window anyway, so it's all good.
Why would we throw Fauci out the window?
I said basic science,
and he's advanced. He says he does. Sorry, his followers say he does.
Well, at the very least, they think he walks on water, so
Yeah.
Well, he represents the science apparently,
Indeed.
as opposed to the science itself.
I feel like we're going to have to rerun that whole Jesus routine now.
Well, we could save it for another time and actually just do the whole thing.
Well, you're going to have a hard time nailing them to a beaker. Those are made out of glass.
You say that, but they make those shot glasses that have got the bullet in them,
Well, I mean, you could nail them to it when it's a couple thousand degrees. That would work. It'd just probably be a little bit more uncomfortable for the guy using the hammer.
Well, I mean, let's be fair. That's a price worth paying. But
whatever you do, make sure you turn the camera on.
And fair. Oh, you know what? That's a brilliant segue, sir. Brilliant. Speaking of cameras and regrets, so it seems like people are finally starting to ask about who Ray Epps is and why he's got so many different things to say to so many different patriot groups, and why he had them to say while old Don Treasy was having his conversation with the people about 20 to 30 minutes before then. As a matter of fact, he was talking to folks and advising them how cool it would be to go and storm the Capitol.
Yeah, so like the 4chan meme, poking the stick, go commit crimes.
Oh yeah.
Hey kid.
Yeah. Don't you wanna go storm the Capitol tomorrow? Which, by the way, greatest video of any of this is them all chanting "Fed" at him. 10 seconds later.
Yeah, that is excellent stuff. Seeing it called out really, it warms your heart a little bit.
It really does. Oh, it's sort of horrible funny, though, because let's face it, all those people still sitting in jail in perpetuity for a bunch of them. Right?
Oh, man, I mean, we've got essentially a bunch of trespassers that are being held in horrible conditions, absolutely, absolutely atrocious conditions, stuff that would make a Turkish jail look, well, actually, about on par, being fair. But
Indeed.
we've got these people being held in nearly third world conditions for essentially trespassing. We've got basically no real worthwhile convictions.
I got a question on that one. I mean, we're not talking about the toilet water fountains of AOC fame here now, are we? I mean, we have actual video or photo evidence of what's going on.
Well, I mean, of
more so than the hearsay that you'd find otherwise. That's my curiosity.
Oh, as
I
far
don't
as
follow it up on it terribly in depth here, so.
So we're not going to get video of the jail conditions.
And no.
That is going to be for one of two reasons.
I think we've got like one or two letters out of people in there, and then we've got what's been conveyed by their lawyers, to my understanding.
Yeah. And
so the lawyers would be a little more reliable, but I'd still say it's probably more on the hearsay side of things as far as what I'm going to believe. A letter out of jail, they could be talking about friggin' dragons and stuff at that point. I would not put much into that, but that's just because at this point you just kind of have to be cynical and skeptical of these things.
Now, that said, we do have testimony out of one of the people who was released after saying, I don't like Donald Trump anymore,
Fair enough.
And I apologize for ever thinking that he was a good person.
Are we talking about the vegetarian guy?
No, he's actually still going up to trial.
Okay. Yeah,
even though that's happened. What's that?
Right.
Didn't he just get sentenced?
Oh, he may have. What was it? QAnon shaman. That's right.
Yeah. And he got something ridiculous, mostly because he was in the press. And that might be just my cynical take on it, but
41 months.
Yeah.
And yeah, it looks like that was about mid-November. So even despite his turning tail on that, they still they're still getting him pretty tough.
No, I mean, I will say, as to the be cynical about this, I generally agree. On the flip side, court pleadings are pretty well matching the letters that are coming out of there. There's
fair enough.
Indistinguishable differences.
Well, that's corroboration then. I would be curious to see that kind of thing.
Indeed.
But that's all I would ask, is that something that is coming through in testimony or has some kind of bearing of proof behind it.
Well, much like HCQ in the early days, it's starting to pan out as correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's how these things go, right? It runs counter to what let's call it lefty media likes, and therefore it gets no coverage. So it's a right-wing conspiracy until next month when it's
I don't put any. I also wouldn't come in with accusations of conspiracy either. It's just I wait for something to be proved before I believe it. Happy to have an open mind on these things.
It's a more, world we live in.
That's fair. Well, Craig is my grounded side, so you have to understand that he's my hard science fella, where I'm the more esoteric one, and then we've got Steve, who's the other side of the hard science. So we got a pretty fun mix here. It's a shame he couldn't be here, but he's got honest to God, he's doing God's work right now. He's doing some really good stuff. He's helping somebody out that's been through some really bad addiction and some trouble in life.
Help.
And well, you know what?
He's doing his work, and
he's doing good work. He's trying to help somebody out that's trying to get out of bad addiction, and that's just a better place to find yourself on the other side of.
Yeah. And a lot of work on a guy who I don't know's behalf, but I've been there with people. It'd be nice if you could stop puking on my floor through this part of this kind of place.
Oh yeah.
Well, they're past that, and now it's on to the okay. We need to figure out how to fix the damage that you've done to yourself. Ooh. So, but he actually got through that part of it pretty quick. So, I mean, he's got a good method. And hey, it gets out there. I'll be happy to see
him write up whatever he's doing as a case study if it's working out.
I think he said he's going to try and do that. So let's hope he does, because I mean, a good method to help addicts is Good Lord, we need that today. More than ever. We've got so many people addicted and in a bad place.
Give them structure to rail against within reason.
And also, it comes from a point that's not Narcotics Anonymous, a.k.a. Scientology, and also not the church. So these are two big selling points.
See, the Narcotics Anonymous guys, I don't follow them anymore, so I'll just take your Scientology at face value. There was a time, I mean, I'm old as dirt and a giant boomer or something, but 30 years ago, where those guys were doing some decent work.
And sure. And not to say that NA doesn't do good work. It's just it's foundationally built on Scientology, or Scientological teachings, I guess would be the correct term.
Awesome. So if we're talking about an Alcoholics Anonymous derivative, then they're pseudo,
we are not
religious. Okay, because that's pseudo religion that goes into that is not a good thing.
No, actually, no. They specifically went to that. Yeah, no. With the Narcotics Anonymous, they just went with it so that they could kind of do a call out to Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah, it's actually that's ugly. That's
such a brutal thing. If they're anything close to Scientology, like Clearwater should just be nuked at this point. Or better yet, chuck them in a volcano. They can go meet Xenu.
Well, hey, look, that sounds like you're just promoting them.
Well,
there we go. I should go jump on a couch.
There is actually. Oh man, I can't remember the name of the group right now. There's a couple of Branch Davidians still around, but that's not who I'm trying to think of. When Hale Bop was coming around, they're the ones I want to say out in California. The Raelians. Not the. Actually, it might have been the Raelians. They had the outfit and the Nikes. Yeah, there's still one around, by the way, and he's on YouTube.
What? Okay, now I need that link.
I will gladly include it in the show links, and as a matter of fact, I'll drop it for you when we finish up. But yes, and he does regular live streams. He was the one that was meant to stay behind as the record keeper, and he's like keeping up everything. It's amazing in its way.
That's got to be fascinating from an anthropology perspective, man.
Absolutely.
That's got to be fascinating for about a million reasons.
Right.
It is. It absolutely is. No lie at all.
Record of YouTube videos of his change in personality over time, or its consistency.
It's actually since the events that he's made the YouTube channel. So you're basically able to just see someone who's kept it up the whole time.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really wild.
That's another thing. He didn't drop like any of this because isn't the world supposed to be over by now?
Well, I don't think that their particular dogma actually called for an end of the world so much as there's this chance for us to escape.
Well, yeah, and the reasoning went something along the line. Well, you know what? I guess to be fair, in retrospect, maybe they had a weird point, right?
Yeah.
The world's going to go to hell, and we need to eject now. And you know what?
The semantics of that was kind of left open, wasn't it?
It was.
It's just like every other doomsday cult. It's kind of like, well, you can twist the words a little bit, finagle this comma here, and it looks kind of like right now.
Look, as everyone knows, you can switch any two letters.
Oh, right, yes. What the hell is that guy's name? There was that great bullshit episode where they had the guy with the Nostradamus. No, but the guy, what was the crazy bookshot guy's name? I can't remember.
I will never remember that guy's name, but I will I will equally never forget his. Oh, everybody knows you could just swap two letters. And I was like,
exactly.
Really?
I love that part. You just rotate them around, swap them around. Who cares? How many times can you do this? As many times as you want.
There we go. 3SPM is the channel name. I'll put that in the show links, and I will be glad to link you fellas up for that one as well.
Oh my God.
All right. I'll drop that in general for you.
I feel like this is going to be hours of my life just instantly wasted.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, like 3-hour streams every couple days.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I only drop in
from now and then. There's got to be someone out there paying attention enough to like make little 15-minute clips out of the crazy.
Oh my God, this has been going on for a long time.
Oh yeah, no, he up. The website's still up, and he's the guy that maintains it.
12 years.
Wow.
12 years.
Holy shit.
Yeah, you wanna talk about a deep dive?
It's only like 10 videos a year, maybe even less than that, and sometimes he skips a year.
But they've
I mean,
been
some things might have been taken down too.
That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Because if I understand correctly, from the bits I've seen, he does get into some real kind of chintzy topic areas that YouTube does not like.
Well, that's everything, so.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Depending on whose shoes you stepped on that day.
Right. So, since we're not really on that topic, but we were covering it. I was told that you actually were able to make it to the festivities in January last year.
I was at January 6th.
So when we did our show leading up to that, I told everybody, "Hey, go down there and talk to your reps. Do what you got to do, because it's important that we have our voice heard." Since then, things have become a little more complicated.
Well, there was the shtick, right? The channel was doing pretty good at the time, and I said, "Look, I'm going, and yes, I am going to protest. If you want to go down there and cause a problem, then stay the hell away from me. But if you think this is BS, then I'll see you down there." And that it is simply saying that is now a problem, right? Because it's how dare you, right? And you get a lot of the insurrection-y like, "Oh, you went down there to cause an insurrection." Like, look, I don't know if you know it, right? This is the most well-armed country in world history. We don't go to insurrections without guns, right? And you can give me all the stupid New York Times articles or USA Today articles. There were 5 guns found. Okay, look, I prior to my tragic boating accident, I owned more than 5 guns. All right.
Yeah. Well, I know that I have the worst luck with boats. The worst luck with boats. I haven't managed to keep a single.
Dangerous strait, sir.
Well, every time I go out fishing, you got to take protection. And this last time, I lost my last one. What are you going to do?
Indeed.
What are you going to do?
Problem.
It is. It is. Well, they're made of metal, so it's like when it drops, you're not going to just grab it.
A magnet would work, but they're all non-magnetic.
Well, I don't want to buy clients from clients. I don't want to buy products from China, so I don't have that many magnets.
Freudian slip.
Oh, exactly. But it's sort of like sunglasses too, right? You go out, you're on the boat, you got a quality pair of sunglasses with you. Those things fall off the boat, they're gone forever, and they're down at the bottom of the lake, and fish are hoarding them. But if you were to take a high point out there, I'm sure it would just float back up to the surface.
Oh yeah,
probably.
The
high point would hop back in the boat, wouldn't it?
Fish would throw it back.
You don't abandon me. I don't suck.
I have a friend.
Oh my! Now I don't want to back you into a corner here, but I've been told that you might have been one of the folks that fucked around with the barriers. Is there anything to that?
I didn't. I have leaned. Well, okay, so I am in the Tucker Carlson documentary.
Oh, congratulations! Right? I hope.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of people that as soon as it aired were like, "Oh my God, Don, they've got video of you like ripping down a barrier," and I was like, "No, they don't, because I never ripped down a barrier." And so I went and watched the thing, and I went, "No, that's when we all got tear gassed." And you can see me.
Would that be about the same time that one lady got tear gassed and beat to death by the cops?
I don't know, because that was in a very different part of the building from me.
That's fair.
And so, there's this video of me, and I am holding on to one of the barriers, like death grip style, with one hand, and, trying to get as much tear gas off me as I can with the other one. And I'm like, Look,
Hey, as long as you're not pulling a Yoba and be like, milk, 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 I need milk, you're pretty much okay there.
oh no. I would say there's no crying, but it's tear gas, so invariably there was crying. It's
Right.
just no whining, right?
Fair enough. Fair
But
enough.
you
Just a
know
lot of
it.
manly cursing then, huh?
Uh, so when the first set of barricades came down, I just jogged up to
Mhm.
wherever the next set of barricades were, and right as soon as I got there, a cop pulled out some OC spray and OC sprayed me in the face. And that was the only time all day where I was seriously cursing because that stuff sucks.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I haven't had the pleasure of getting it directly, but I have been in the vicinity, and it's not the pleasantest of stuff.
No, and it was, OC spray is a slightly different animal, and for those that don't know, it's a big, deep, bright red, and so you know,
Other point of note, if you're cooking your eggs on the stove and you're using cayenne pepper, make sure the burner's completely covered.
yes.
Yeah.
Because you'll learn what it's like on your own. You can do it in your own home.
Mm. The only real problem with that is getting it out.
Oh, yeah. No, it gets into everything and
But
stays there and toxifies over time.
no. In the world of, I should probably say, legally covering things, there are a lot of people out there who I have talked to who are like, yeah, so I heard that you beat the shit out of a cop, and I'm like, no. I mean,
Well, we
I
know that
stood a
didn't
few.
happen. I mean, what?
Yeah, you
What
still, I
the
heard
whole...
you. I
You
heard
still
you
beat
kidnapped
your
Whitmer,
wife?
baby.
Exactly, right? And it's odd because I don't know where a lot of this comes from. Most of the day, I stood leaning on a barrier talking to a cop. So, I'm I didn't do anything exceptionally crazy in my opinion. I'm sure that will not stop them from telling you that I was the leader of an insurrectionary group, but
Well, actually,
So
I've
cordial
been told that
conversation.
this whole thing was planned by a gloom tube who was responsible for all of the things. The internationally notorious that I'm sure you have both heard of.
I I feel like I'm gonna go look this guy up, and he's gonna have like 21 subscribers or something.
He's actually kind of an art house guy that was streaming on the at the time, restreaming, I should say, at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like showing Yoba's feed and somebody else's feed and somebody else's feed, and then the Times did an article about him because why not? They're the New York Times. I mean, it's their job to lie.
It is. But I mean, you know, well, at some point I may or may not, go get my own little hit piece by them on the subject.
Well, you don't. You,
'Cause,
you haven't really made it until Taylor Inns has come out and said something shitty about you.
well, we all have hopes and dreams.
Oh, absolutely. I'm aiming for it myself.
So, um,
Well, sir, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I'm also glad we could clear that up because I'll be honest, I got a little bit of messaging behind the scenes like, "Hey, man, this guy, this and that." So I'm glad we were able to clear that up quite amicably. So hopefully that'll resolve any further questions as well.
happens a lot. There's a lot of. I've been rather open about being at January 6th, and then as soon as you say you were there, it's like, well, clearly you attempted to burn down the Capitol. Like, not, no.
Yeah, we're not saying you're John Sullivan or anything. I mean,
Right.
you're not Stuart Rhodes. You're not the mysterious individual who planted something in front of both the RNC and DNC.
If there is anything that points to how ridiculously stupid this is, it is that, people who, like, were in DC that day are getting tracked down, and we can't find that guy. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. Why? And the other thing, the bombshell of this that Stuart Rhodes, Ray Epps, and John Sullivan have been subpoenaed. They haven't been subpoenaed by the January 6th Commission. They've been subpoenaed by one of the defendants' defense people.
Yeah.
Like how ridiculous is this? What kind of honkety honk clown world have we found ourselves in?
Indeed. But see, this is the problem, though, is that so much of this is going to keep, so much of January 6th is going to keep going on like this, right? The day before yesterday, I think, the article started coming out. Every day is January 6th.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. This is their foundation myth.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is their Big Bang. This is their God passed along the face of the waters moment.
Exactly. And so much of, there was a guy that I talked to that has been, in fact, I talked to the guy that was in Pelosi's office on the way out of D.C. that day.
Ooh.
I forget his name, but
they
the
threw
guy.
the book at that fella.
Yeah, they did. And he was, he was like, yeah, so just walked in, sat down, took a picture, right? And
did he touch your vodka ice cream?
see, that is the important question, right? Did he steal government property, apparently? But and nothing that gets talked about from January 6th is anything like what actually happened on January 6th, right?
Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, if we talk about the yet still unindicted breach team, I mean, that pretty well meets the descriptions, but then, we only know who like one or two of those people are, and they kind of glow a little.
A little bit. And that's another thing, right, is people talk about whether or not Antifa was there, right? And I know there's the video out there of them changing out of black bloc into Trump clothes and all that kind of stuff. I was walking around handing out water near the end of the day, and a dude in black bloc runs up and goes, "Can I get some water?" And I was like, "No, you're a fucking communist." He turned around and walked away. I mean, they were definitely there. There was no, no excuses, no nothing. For a bunch of guys who were on the backside of the building, Trump put out that video that was like, "Hey, everybody go home," and about 20% of the crowd was just like, "F Trump, he's a piece of this part of the swamp too, and we need to, go and I don't know, fight the cops or whatever." And most of the crowd was like, "I don't know who the hell those people are, but we're leaving."
Yeah, that'd be Ray Epps and co.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And so, it just nobody. There's more rumor than anything vaguely regarding fact about it, and for having simply been there, occasionally worries me some.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, they're doing everything in their power to destroy anyone even remotely connected to that.
Indeed.
Well, who isn't in their employ, I should specify.
Which, by the way, has been the other great part about this is, Dawn, you said you were at January 6th and you're not in prison, so you must be a Fed.
Yeah, if what you say is correct and you didn't cross that line, then as much as they might want to, as desperate as they could be to put you there, they just don't have what it takes to do so.
I mean, if you look at the numbers on things, there's got to be plenty of people that fit into the niche that you're in. There's only 800 or so people that made it through the doors inside the building.
Yeah.
Inside and out. And then there was maybe a couple thousand outside. There's 25,000 or so total that were there for the rally, I think.
Oh, so this is another.
I don't have the numbers on top of my head.
That is particularly weird about this is everybody somewhat rightly concentrates on like all the guys who are on the side of the building where the doors open and people went in, right? That's where all the discussion is. But there was a point in the middle of the day where I jumped up on the highest thing I could find and looked behind me, and people were stretched out from the back of the Capitol building into the National Mall, like a couple hundred feet. There were thousands and thousands of people.
Oh yeah, it was akin to Obama's inauguration.
Oh yeah. Well, and
hilariously enough.
Yeah, right. And look, at the time, it was what everybody was making fun of, right? Oh, a bunch of dumb boomers who were just singing the national anthem. It's exactly what it was. And it wasn't until a couple days later, well, that night, I guess is more accurate, that it became, this bunch of dumb boomers who are, not worth paying any attention to, suddenly became insurrectionists, right?
Oh, yeah, you could watch the narrative shift in real time.
Mm-hmm. So, it's irritating at some points that it goes down this way. But
well, let's
what are you
hope
gonna
that
do?
this provides some answer to some of the curious parties, and that maybe we can, I don't know, disabuse some people of those ideas. What do you say?
We'll see. Again, I tend to be pretty open about it. So if you really want to know, just ask.
Well, fair enough. That's a very reasonable stance to take. And I'd say we've covered everything that. Actually, we came into this without really much of a plan, and we've covered a lot of very interesting subjects. And been a pleasure having you on, sir.
Well, thank you. It's been a good time being here.
And so I know I talked with your scheduler, and that I might come on to yours. We'll have to figure that out because I'm totally down. See if I can't get Craig here. Maybe also, fingers crossed, Steve.
Indeed. I'm sure we'll figure out something.
And was there anything else either of you two guys were wanting to try and cover since we're doing this early show today?
I was just curious what kind of conversation you had with if you're able to go into details, what kind of conversation you had with the cop at the barricade.
Oh yeah.
That's a fair question.
Was it, cordial conversation, or were you trying to explain yourself, or what kind of things were going on there?
So,
Just you guys shooting the shit?
for about half the day, that's a lot of what it was, right? There was a guy that I got up and I started leaning on this barricade, and he was like, "Don't come over the barricade." And I was like, "Dude, I'm not coming over the barricade. Wherever you guys tell me to stop, that's where I'm stopping." And he was like, "Oh, well, okay then." Right? And so, I was he was he's sitting there, and somebody tried to pull the barricade out from under us, and that guy eventually went away, and he was like, "Thanks for not pulling on that." And I was like, I mean, look, I don't actually want to fight you guys. If I wanted to fight you guys, I would be coming up over this barricade." And he was like, "Well, that's a fair point." So I was, how we doing? You guys have riots here every other day, and the right generally doesn't show up. Conservatives generally don't show up. Republicans generally don't show up. Is it, how we doing? He goes, "Well, you got a hell of a lot of people here. I'll give you that." So, um, and, there was a bunch of stuff like that most of the day, and at some point he was like, "Well, I don't even really disagree with you guys," and I was like, "Well, man, look, I'm not coming over the barricade, but you could. There's nothing stopping you from hopping over here and telling these people to pound sand and that you hate what's going on." And he was like, "I really kind of can't." And I was like, "Hey, look, I'm not telling you that you have to give up your pension, but seriously, at some point, you either just agree with this and keep going, or you go, well, look, I'm not doing this anymore." And I disagree with what's going on. He was like, "Well, you got kind of a good point, but I out
Just
came the
following
list of
orders.
I got family, I got rent, and I was like, look, man, at some point, either that is the guiding principle of your life or not." And he was like, "Well, but you guys can't just rush up on federal buildings like this." And I was like, "Well, no one is like burning it down."
Yeah,
This is
like what?
quite
Just
literally
just prior a month ago, there was a big group of people that stormed the Capitol and got inside, and none of them
right.
were charged for anything.
Exactly, and I was like, "Well, look, man, most of what's going on here is people, yeah, just shouting and yelling, and I mean that's literally what the First Amendment's for." "Well, but still, you shouldn't be in a federal building." So, okay, well, fine. And somewhere around there, I got tear gassed. It took a step back, and then somebody did rip the barricade out from under him, and I didn't see that guy again for a while. But just walked up to the next one, got which was all of a couple feet back. Stood in front of that and tried to talk to a couple of those guys, and right around then they started pulling flags out of the crowd, right? Because the guys with the flag, they were shooting tear gas, 40 millimeter tear gas grenades into the crowd. And at some point, the guys with the flags started hitting the tear gas grenades back at the cops.
Right.
Oh, that's funny.
And so they started reaching in and pulling the flags out of the crowd. And then they started throwing them on the ground. I was like, "Look, son of a bitch, how about if you just don't, right? How about you pretend that you give a shit for a minute and at least lean it on something. I know that's not the correct thing to do with it, but don't throw the goddamn flag on the ground. And he was like, well, like, it's really not that big of a deal. And I was like,
yeah, kind of.
Seriously?
Kind of is, actually,
And then I told the guy, I was like, fine, I'll tell you what. How about I'll go pick him up? He was like, oh, I can't let you over these barricades. And I was like, well, what? It just doesn't matter at all? And he was like, well, no, but, like, I'm not going to do anything about it. All right, hell with this guy. The prior cop was a lot better. So I started ignoring him for a while.
Just following orders.
Pretty much, And this is when you start to get some of the videos that are not very prolific, but you see the cops with the like industrial strength pepper spray canisters, right? It loops under your arm and it's a giant spray, and they're just walking up and spraying into the crowd. And right after that, they started doing kettling, basically, where they just jump into the crowd and grab somebody and then pull them back in. And this is where that video of the steps in the back, they pull somebody out of the crowd and just beat the hell out of them for a while. That happened about that time of the day.
Well, to be fair, that happened quite a few times that day.
Yeah, it did. But that's where it started happening. Is they had, they got the riot gear cops, and after that, the cops became a lot less talkative. Once the riot gear came out, that was about it.
Well, so oftentimes those riot cops are kind of trained to a bit of a different standard and held in a bit of a different light.
They're on a completely different edge when it comes to that. When they get the riot gear on, the assumption is that there's something that's going to happen, even if nothing happens. The point is, in theory at least, their safety and yours, blah blah blah.
Yeah. But
they're supposed to be looking for shit happening, not relaxing and trying to engage in the public a little bit more.
And that was about the end of the conversation for the day. To be fair, around not too much long, couple hours after that is when they called in the National Guard. Trump put out the video, etc. So,
Pelosi did not delayed as long as she could, but they did eventually get him out there.
Indeed, nobody talks about it, but it was nightfall by the time the Guard showed up. So,
do you think there's anything that the police could have done? Well, I mean, obviously there's many different points of faults and either favor in the conduct that they had, but was there something you think that could have calmed things down or done better that day?
Oh man, so I hate to be that guy, but generally speaking, the cops instigated most of the problems that day. There's a story going around about a guy that got hit in the face and died of a aneurysm, right?
Oh, sicknick.
No, not sicknick, not a cop.
Okay.
And it's been real quietly reported, and not a lot of people are talking about it. That guy, as people started walking up to the back of the Capitol building, not the side that everybody walked into, right as you got up to where the stairs are in the back of the Capitol building, a cop leaned over the top of the little dais that's there and shot that dude in the face with a 40 millimeter grenade. Now, to be fair, it wasn't a frag grenade, but it was a 40 millimeter gas grenade, right? And when I say in the face, I mean directly north of his right eye and a little bit out towards his right ear.
Yeah, that's basically getting smashed in the face with a hammer.
Yeah, and
a big hammer.
We're talking 30, 40 feet maximum, right? Gas grenade didn't even go off, didn't even meet arming distance. So, that thing was moving, and no one had done anything, right? It was just people, to be fair, walking, running, jogging, right? Not everybody in some slow, peaceful march or anything. Hell, this is the time that I was jogging up to the Capitol building, right? And so, that guy died a couple days later. And for all of the, and you hear this in some of the cops that have given interviews, we were trying to help the wounded. My ass. that crowd pulled that guy out of there, and ran him to the back and called an ambulance.
So is this a name that we could get later, maybe, or just if it escapes you, that's fine.
Say that one more time. Is it we could what?
Is this a name that we could get later?
Would you be able to get us the info on the individual, if possible?
If the name escapes you, that's fine. That's interesting to follow up on that.
Yeah, I'd personally like to throw in an article, at least if I can find one on it, in the show links so that people can follow up on their own afterwards too. If you can get it to me, you or your booker, whoever, whatever.
I'll get it to you.
Much obliged. Sir.
Probably just send it to you on Twitter because I think that's where it got sent to me.
Oh yeah, no, that's perfect. Just I'd like to be able to include that, just if not for our own reference sake, for people following up on this on their own too.
Probably, I mean, by all means, because that's equally at the same time, right? Again, I had some people with me, right? So jogging up to the front, and right as this guy takes this 40mm grenade in the face, there's a set of stairs on each side of the Capitol where the scaffolding was in all the video, right?
Yeah.
And there's a little dais above that. On that dais was a squad, a dozen, 15 maybe cops with M16s aimed down into that crowd. And that was literally the moment people got there. And so I'm grabbing people as fast as I can, being like, I don't know where the hell you want to stand, but it needs to not be in that area. This big stone thing between us and the bullets sounds great. And so, that goes on like it is for a while. And make no mistake, I'm not saying everybody who was there was some saint or anything. There were plenty of people who.
Well, I mean, I've already mentioned Yoba, so he was there.
Right. In fact, there was a permanent set of fencing on the Capitol building, and a couple of guys kicked those down. I got hit in the face with one as they threw it back through the crowd. So, there are plenty of dickheads there. But, as everybody's standing there at these barricades, equally, as I said, right as I ran up, somebody else sprayed me in the face. Right? So they were, they didn't have anything. They couldn't do anything for crowd control, really, because they popped a lot of it right quick. And then it was about 20, 30 minutes after that they had the guy throwing both tear gas and those rubber ball beehive grenades into the crowd. And he's just standing behind the line of cops that's at the barrier, just slow pitching them over their head, right? That nice, easy, up in the air, angled arc, so that they're popping right on top of the crowd. And they kept doing that till the crowd got pissed off. And as soon as the crowd got pissed off, then they would escalate to something else. And when people started pulling the crowd back, all of a sudden you'd see the gas grenades again. All of a sudden you'd see those little beehive rubber ball grenades again. And I was like, what the hell is wrong with you guys?
That's incredibly peculiar.
It is. And what kills me about this is it sounds a lot like what you hear from, Antifa, right? When they go out and start actual riots, the cops incited it. And I've been on the ground for Antifa starting a riot. Antifa starts the riot.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah,
So,
that's kind of.
I mean, to be fair here, they're they have an organization. They follow tradecraft hierarchies. So
they do.
To an extent, yes. And the way that they operate, I would not be surprised if there were useful idiots on the ground. Not to say that anybody surrounding you was, but there's likely people that for Antifa were on the ground there in earnest, thinking they were making their difference in the revolution or whatever. And then they have the jackass next to them pop a cop in the face and then start a riot.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
The guy who's there to make shit happen actually does the job, and the other people are left confused, wondering what the hell happened. They say the cop did it because that's all they saw.
Yeah. And that definitely happened a few times. Benefit for me, as it were, because I almost got yanked over the barrier once. Is a cop I was sitting talking to in the middle of the day. Somebody started, somebody somewhere if you've never been in a crowd like that, it's impossible to tell what's going on more than about 3 or 4 people away from you.
Sure.
And
dense crush of
so,
people. That makes sense.
yeah, and it's just a mountain of humanity, right? You know, basically everybody's shoulder to shoulder. There's a few breaks in there where there's stairs or whatever, so people are on the next stair down or that sort of thing. But generally speaking, it's just a mountain of humanity, right? But the barrier that I'm holding on to, somebody starts shaking it from the other side, and cops start reaching in trying to pull people out of the crowd. And since there's a barrier between us, you can see a little bit further right there, but I couldn't tell you that cop's badge number, or even what his height was, right? It's just arms reach out across. And so, as they start doing that, and as much as there have been some, cops started a lot of problems here. Look, if a bunch of cops are standing at a barrier and it's time to reach across and grab people, then it's just time to reach across and grab people. That's how unit movement works, right? And so cops start reaching across, and one of them grabs me by the shoulder, and the dude standing next to me goes, "It wasn't him." Are you sure? Yeah, he's been standing there the past 2 hours. It wasn't him. So, if I ever run into a problem with this, I hope I can find that cop.
Right? Yeah, good luck.
Did you have video on at the time?
No. So that was another problem. Is there are a bunch of people who've got live streams out of there, right?
Mm-hmm.
From both sides of the building, and I have 2 phones that I take for this sort of stuff. In the way that basically everybody who records with a cell phone does, right? And I couldn't get either one of them to get anything out, which has made me suspicious from the very beginning of everybody who was live streaming this, because I was trying all day long, to the point that I had a guy who was with me that take 30 seconds of video, and it was like, "Well, do you mind being the runner who just clicks the upload button?" He was like, "No, cool." And so, here's 30 seconds of video. All right, take a dead sprint. Next phone, take 30 seconds of video, dead sprint, upload. That sort of thing.
I understand. Actually, that's a lot of what they're having to do in Australia and parts of Europe now with a lot of their footage from their riots, because for some reason the signals are really bad whenever they're having demonstrations.
To be fair, when you cram a bunch of people into a very small area with cell phones,
oh yeah, there is only so much space on the network.
Well, it's the problem is it's the slowest. It's kind of the slowest connection. Tells everyone else how fast they can go. So when you cram people in more densely, and everyone's trying to do the same thing on the same towers, it really does screw things up bad.
Oh, it's a denial of service attack on every tower.
Yeah,
intentionally.
Exactly.
That's how it works, right?
It turns into a kind of DDoS. Yes.
You've got average person has like 10 apps that are reporting in at any given time. Well, put 300,000 people on. Let's be generous and say 10 towers. That's 30,000 person a tower. Towers are meant to hold something like a few hundred people at any given time. So there's just limits on what the networks can do, which again is what makes me so. How were you live streaming? Now, if there was anybody who was sporting satellite, I get it, but I looked into that when I went there, and that is ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, those really haven't dropped much in price at all.
Yeah, and if you're going to do stuff like streaming, it's even worse, right? Because you need, it's about 2 megs is the hard minimum, and it's really easy to get about 500K. You could do that pretty reasonably, but once you break the 1 meg line, it gets really expensive.
I can believe that.
So,
especially with satellite. Yeah. Now, it will be interesting on a vaguely related note. It'll be interesting to see if old Elon tries to capitalize on Starlink by adding a phone option.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, that's brilliant.
The current option for satellite, it is what you get satellite package they've got. It's like $100 a month.
Yeah.
And it's for high-speed satellite, which is fascinating on its own. So, I mean, technically, you've already got the voice option if you're using anything, and you can.
Oh yeah, VoIP is always an option.
Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Well, so be careful with that, because much like your home internet connection, high speed is not really very well defined. And
Yeah, in
Oh yes,
America specifically, it's
yeah,
undefined. Whereas in the
exactly.
European Union, I think it's 100 megs.
that is the definition in I think it's South Korea where they have just about
Yeah,
the highest connectivity on the planet.
yeah,
They I think it's by law you can't have less than 100 availability.
yeah. The government there paved over the whole country in fiber. God, almost 20 years ago,
Yeah,
and they've been pretty wild about what you can get for bandwidth ever since.
and they basically been routinely kicking the U.S.'s pants until Google Fiber came along, and then even then only so many customers get um, that sorry 1 gigabit
Yeah,
fiber line stuff. So
yeah.
it's getting better. It's good,
It is.
but
I mean, there's still major cities without full fiber service for any given
yeah,
customer. So we've got a bit of a ways to go, but the free market
Indeed.
isn't necessarily the fastest solution, but it is usually the best.
it's fairly efficient though.
Yeah.
Well, this is another one of those things I looked into doing in my life. Is all right, go start ISP. What's this look like? And it's
That's gotta hurt.
expensive. Don't get me wrong, but the real problem continuously when you're dealing with cities is the city government. You know,
Oh yeah,
um,
zoning is a motherfucker. Doesn't matter where you
yeah,
are.
Yeah.
and it's okay. Let's get particularly autistic for a minute here. So zoning for your ISP is done by the pole.
Huh.
And I mean that literally. Every
Hmm.
single poll. And for all of you who are like, Don, you don't know what you're talking about. My ISP runs, fiber under the ground. It is between pole distances, right? So pole 1 to 2. Um, and it is that way in most of the country, in every major city, and even most of the smaller cities. Is the way that they deal with this is you lease pole distance, and then they draw lines of where you can and have to go and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I want no part of this because the people that you have to compete with to get that pole is Comcast, AT&T,
Yeah.
Verizon. They're not giving it to you.
Fascinating. That does explain why I see the rise of wireless, going so much faster
Yeah,
because you're not. It's just a matter of finding a place to put it, be it a pole, be it at the top of a building, whatever. You can just put something wherever. You don't have to run it on wires that already exist. Or new
exactly.
wires alongside wires that already exist, which require, just like you say, you've got to get their leases from the city, state, whatever.
Well,
Yeah,
that's the new wire is horribly expensive.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
And then you're moving beyond zoning. You're going to have to get lots of permits that they're not going to want to give depending on how big your city is and
You got
how
it.
blue your city is. What, you
And,
want
and
to expand services to people that don't have money? What?
yeah, why? Well, and that's another thing, right?
How's the
Because
poor? What?
I used to get kind of pissed off at the AT&Ts and the Comcast of the world because at the time I was on the West Coast and that's who there is. And they'd go, well, we're looking at expanding into your neighborhood. And I was like, you're a multi-billion-dollar company. Shut up and just do it, right? And then I looked into doing it and I went, oh, that's why they're not doing it. Because every little municipality that you travel through is somebody else that you have to lobby. So
Yeah.
if your suburb is in kind of an odd shape and it would be easier for you to just go in a straight line between 2 points, if one little section of that is in the next town, you have to now go lobby the next town, get a whole new set of permits, get a whole new, set of per pole zoning agreements, etc. And if anybody else, if Comcast runs through that area, you have to get them to be willing to modify the Comcast contract, which by itself is basically impossible.
Yeah, good luck levying Congress to do anything.
Oh, they'll come at you with an equity agreement, which basically puts you out of business
Oh yeah, and that's
if you're willing to do anything.
exactly. But the problem then becomes right, like no one. Why they don't want to put any of this fiber in there is for everybody who lives in the suburbs and is like everyone around me has fiber. Why don't I? This is why, right? And I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot of this really ties back to the same kind of bullshit that happens every single day in California, and it's
Oh
just
yeah.
because people kind of get how that is. It's like I want to do something, but the state says no, or the city says no, and that's how a lot of these things really play out. So you can kind of explain them inside of that framework.
Oh man, did you see that San Francisco parasite with that thread about how why he's moving to Miami and how he doesn't like Miami politics already, but he's gonna go there?
No, what?
Yeah,
That
there's
sounds typical.
yeah, I find this guy again. Um, I bet if I search from my name and then I just put in parasite, I'll probably find him,
There you go.
or locust, something of that variety.
A swarm of them,
I mean,
anyway.
this is this is not really a surprise. You know, there are two major groups of people leaving California. One of them is everybody who is to the right of Mao, right? And I mean that legitimately. They, you know,
Hmm.
oh, I'm a huge
Sadly, it's
socialist,
not a joke
but
anymore.
yeah, we're going a
There
little
you
too
go,
far
guys.
now.
You're gonna love this thread.
Oh no.
Hari Rangavan.
Aha, yes, I will gladly include that. Oh, but of course.
This he wrote himself a blog post on why
And
he's moving, and he thought
and
he'd be well received, but and everybody hates it. The people that live there, the people that are living where he's going, and
yeah.
everyone in between.
See that this is the other group of people, right? This is, you know, well, I realize that San Francisco should be progressive super heaven, but for some reason it's just not
Yep,
working out.
yep. The grass is always greener to the plague. So
Well,
he's gonna go and vote for the same shit that made him want to move in the first place, and be confused again in about 10 years.
Yeah. Well, and this is,
why does everywhere I move turn to shit?
yeah. Well,
Literally, in
so
this case. I mean, we are talking about San
I mean,
Francisco.
you ain't wrong.
I like
Um,
how he says in with this one post, the Midwest really is wonderful. Spent nearly a decade in Chicago. And points there, Chief. That's not Midwest. That's Chicago.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's where the
right.
Crypt Keeper lives. Jesus.
No joke. Uh, you know why,
Yep.
by the way? You know why a bunch of Californians show up and turn everything to hell? Because everybody moves out of California for the on this front, right? There's always one policy that they disagreed with that now actually impacts their life, and they hate it, right?
Oh,
And I've watched
Yeah.
it happen
I was just
over
going
and
to
over
say
and
it's
over
because
again.
cancer just metastasizes by its nature, but, whatever.
Yeah, this is
Prop
how.
65 didn't cover politics.
Ex-
Oops.
and it should have. Though, funny enough, it's on every political building in the state. Um,
Hmm.
but everybody moves out because of one policy that they find ridiculous because they grew up with a lot of these, right? And they've been slow rolled with them, and so they've gotten used to them over the years. And eventually, one particularly weird California thing happens, and they go, "That's it. I'm leaving. This is a problem." And they go, and wherever they move to doesn't have every other policy they got used to. And the biggest example of this was the 30-day mandatory return that all of California has, right? Californians keep moving all over the country, finding out that that's a California law and not, a federal law, and then voting it in and wondering why when they first show up to these places, everybody's return policies are great. Look, you've got 7 days maybe, but if it lights on fire, bring it back and we'll give you a new one. And then they vote in this 30-day return policy, and all of a sudden it's okay. So we'll replace it as long as a
Now
demon
that
popped
it
out of
didn't
it.
happen on it happened on a Tuesday during a blue moon and an eclipse, right?
Right, and they're like, God, why does this keep happening? Like, well, because you keep voting in all of the policies except the ones that you hated, right?
Oh, that
And then it
reminds
turns
me.
out it's
There's
not the same
huge
policy for
strides
everybody.
being made these days in automation for fast food. Isn't that wonderful?
Weird. What a coincidence. That was, oh man. I've been on the internet too long because when that just barely started, right? When it was just barely starting to get traction, I was telling people like you need to stop with all of the workers' rights nonsense. You know, you can argue whatever you want for where this started, but we're now at the point where, you know, you need to have 60 days off per year, right? That's 2 months these people need to be paying you to be not working. Do
I
you
should
have
be
any
so
idea
lucky.
how much, right? Do you have any idea how much you're accelerating? And by the way, when I say that, California basically has that law, right? I think it's 2 weeks and 2 weeks. So it's only a month, guaranteed. But then after you're there for so long, it has to be another few weeks and this, that, and the other. There's a bunch of stuff, right? Um, and it's for full-time workers. So shockingly, California but now basically has no full-time workers.
Yeah, especially if they are from out of California. They definitely don't have any out of California gig workers.
That's a fact. And so, you know, they keep going with this, and they're like, "Well, the automation's coming no matter what." Well, maybe it is, right? But do you want it here tomorrow, or do you want it here in 10 years, right? And it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, right? Because if it's here tomorrow, we're kind of screwed, guys. You
Fair.
know,
Well, it's coming in the
presuming,
next 5 to 10 years. For a lot more than people realize, middle management is going away. A lot of the project management side of middle management,
yeah,
it's
uh,
the AI um, scale up on that is happening, and basically everybody who's in project management actively right now is training the AI that will be taking their job in 5 to 10 years, 5 years more likely.
Yeah, the
yeah,
ugly part of this
Uh,
too is a lot of these cases they could be training the AI without even realizing they're doing it.
well, that's they just exactly the AI watches their actions on like actionable documents and so on.
yeah,
Anything they're doing inside their automated systems, any computer actions, tasking, evaluation, etc. AI watches that and then competes with them in the same company and does it better, and then they're out of a job. And this has been happening for the past 5 or so years, but it's accelerating at this point.
Oh,
And it's great for business. It's just if you're in project management, you need to have translational skills, and a lot of people don't have those.
so this is again the same problem, right?
Yeah, I
You know,
mean truckers
project
are going to get this in a few years too. So it's not like
that
they're out of the.
that probably. Uh, I mean,
Well, they'll put in laws to try and make it harder, and they are doing that. Municipalities are doing that,
well,
but it's not going to work with the economic pressures, especially after this pandemic gets done.
there's two major things that are going to stop it. One, um, we wouldn't have truckers in the way that we have them now if they weren't one of the more powerful lobbies whenever they feel like it.
Hmm.
So that's probably not going away. But two, there is this wild idea that, and you know, I have hated this since Yang started this because, as far as I can tell, he at least popularized it. You know, we're going to lose all the truckers. Okay. Um, this is a statement made by someone who is not familiar with the trucking industry. Um,
Hmm.
Most trucking is done at a company that owns 20 trucks or less capacity. And
Sure.
yeah.
even in that case, most of their trucks are as old as they're legally permitted to get away with, right? Um,
That's a
Basically,
really interesting point. I'd like to cut a little segue in here on that. That's why we saw a lot of the issues specifically in California with unloading, because I believe it was trucks made before 2004 or maybe 2014 were just not allowed to come into the docks.
yeah. California did this thing, 2018 kind of vicinity, where you have to have a digital tachometer specifically to keep track of your mileage and daily run hours.
Uh-huh.
And the response to that was a lot of the trucking industry just going, we're just not doing that, right? All the guys based out of California did it, but for all the guys that are based out of the Midwest, they went, that'd be a hard no. We just won't deliver to California. And that is when California started to have its own little micro shortage problem that nobody talks about, right? And like it wasn't a giant deal, but it did exist. Um, but this problem gets, you know, orders of magnitude bigger if you were looking at guys who are buying, you know, old tractor trailers because they keep on hand, you know, a ridiculously small number of trucks, usually 3 to 5. and then their own truckers buy their own trucks. They go drive for a year or two, and then they go to the bank and say, "See, I make this much money," and they get $100,000 loan for a truck. And they are running their own personal truck and just deducting mileage and repairs and what have you from federal taxes. Well, if that's the case, who the hell is even buying all these trucks? And the answer is nobody, right? What, the individual trucker is going to be like, I'm buying an AI truck to put myself out of a job. Oh, and by the way, I won't get paid for this. That, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and there would basically need to be an industry come out for it.
You forget that the shippers that pay truckers to deliver product have an active financial interest in this, and that a lot of them are larger companies that will be driving that market change. So Amazon, for example, looking at using drones for delivery in cities.
Oh yeah, like an Amazon, a Walmart. You can expect them to
they will buy
inboard their own shipping and do it that way.
The drone thing's already happening, right? There's a handful of
exactly. I'm saying they will buy a fleet of AI trucks to try out at least. So and if it comes down to a cost issue there, they'll side on the one with the lower cost. If they can manage to make AI trucks stupid expensive, then they won't be a financial advantage. But if they don't,
they're going to be stupid expensive regardless, right? Because it's worth noting what you need these things to do.
Yeah, well, you've got to take a semi-truck, point one, and then you've got to automate it, point two, and then you've got to do a bunch more above and beyond that to make those two things work.
Well, let's look at a way that you could also change the infrastructure around the endpoints, because that's largely going to be where the manpower is going to still have to be invested in besides repairs. If you have automatic docking to a drop off or pickup, if you streamline that process in such a way that it is not as difficult as current product transfers can be.
Right, but again,
if it just slides right in there and it's done, then that's a time and a cost savings.
Look at what you're talking about now. You now need to retrofit every major dock in the country. Now,
again,
I can't even imagine.
Out, though, if you don't even have to do that imagine if you're not doing primary dissemination to outlet points, though. Imagine if you're just doing it, say, between warehouses. Even if you're Amazon and you want to transfer between warehouses, and you have a lot of products that you can't fly around.
Sure,
it's possible they might just design in to their next phase of construction, whatever that timeline is. They might have that as one of the planned options, is to have some, a thing for that. Go ahead.
This doesn't change that it's going to be ridiculously expensive, though. And when I say ridiculously, I mean ridiculously, right?
Yeah.
Because there's some parts of this that you obviously are going to be carrying over, right? I mean, a loading dock is a loading dock is a loading dock. It's what you're going to have to put on top of that is where the increased cost comes from. But you're going to have to do that for all new buildings. Then you're going to have to go retrofit all old buildings. Then you're going to have to buy the number of trucks. And, I mean, there's going to be...
buildings aren't as big of an investment for them as the property that they sit on. So the cost of depending on the technology invested into the actual infrastructure itself, yes and no. But we're just talking about 4 walls and a roof. Then the warehouses that they have are remarkably cheap, given the volume that they contain, because the surface area is all you're really paying for.
Right, but what you're talking about is moving them from 4 walls and a roof.
Right. But what I'm saying is that if they have the property already, the restructuring of their infrastructure is not as expensive as the as interruptions to the flow of product through it.
All right, let's take a shot in the dark at a number of what it would cost, and forego the but maybe it'll be X amount. What number are you thinking it's going to take to retrofit?
I have no idea.
Per building, right? Again, shot in the dark. I won't hold you to it.
Oh, sure. Let's say they're large warehouses. Give it somewhere between 10 and 100 million.
Okay. Is that
say there's 100 of those around the country, to give you a round figure.
All right. So what is that? $10 billion we're talking?
Well, up to say $1 billion. We'll cap it at $1 billion.
Okay. So it's $1 billion just for the warehouses. What are the trucks going to cost?
Oh, let's say we throw those in at a $250,000 a piece. That's
Okay.
I think that's a probably
Sounds
a low
reasonable
ball.
for a cutting edge AI truck.
Yeah, right. But let's call it $250,000, right? Let's
Sure, yeah.
yeah. I mean, look, that's not far off. Okay, a time and a third, sort of what a new-ish truck and trailer would cost.
Right.
So maybe that's right. Maybe we get this somehow.
Throw in, say there's say the annualized cost is around $250,000 for a down payment to start there. Yes,
Um,
just to rope in a couple of years of whatever subscription fees and blah 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 they're paying for.
well, guaranteeably they are too, right? Because the AI is
Right.
going to need updates invariably.
Hmm.
They're probably
Service
paying.
contracts, etc.
Yeah, right. So, uh, let's call it within 10 years, say $750,000 a truck.
Sure.
Okay. How many trucks do you think they're going to need?
Uh, Ballpark, say 10,000.
Okay. So, what is that?
We're
That's
getting close to $1 billion again.
right. I was going to say, can we round this to an even 2 billion? And
Yeah.
then the question becomes, what's the return on investment on $2 billion, right?
Well,
Because
keep
that's
in
a
mind
big.
we've already set a reasonable horizon for our ROI at 10 years. So let's call our break even optimistically at 5, but hard brass tacks 10 years.
And
Then that
so
means that
you're
over 10 years you have to earn back your 2 billion, and you have to have percent um, a reasonable
see that
percentage on that is as at an advantage to your current setup.
now. This poses the next problem, right? Uh, most of valuations in this country work on quarters and go no more than five
Sure.
years. And
Well, so if just in industry inside baseball here, so chemical engineering is that's what I do.
sure,
Your typical your plant payback period is 10 years. That's the target.
indeed,
So you have to break even at 10 years. Your business plan goes out to a max of 25 years in terms of your industry production. So if you want to have an ROI, you have to maximize it by 25 years, break even by 10.
exactly.
5 years
Now,
for a turnaround is real hard to do. But
indeed,
this isn't chemical engineering. This is infrastructure for Amazon or whatever.
you got it, right? Who, by the way, are very obviously willing to take risks on infrastructure. So,
Certainly. Well, I was going to point out when we start saying, well, they aren't going to be willing to do this. I was going to point out, look at what they've done for their basically their second tier warehousing. It's
oh
all
no,
roboticized and automated internally.
that's a bit of an exaggeration.
It's a little bit, sure, granted,
Um,
but
but
largely when it comes to packaging orders, um, just not actually like boxing them up, but getting the bins together.
yeah,
They have in their mega warehouses, the handful they have around the country, they've got most of that automated. Like there's fantastic videos on YouTube where you can watch them how they zip by each other like a millimeter gap
yeah,
between them and so on.
there are
It's really fascinating stuff.
Oh
indeed.
yeah, efficiency is just the efficiency
Actually,
products and
Scott,
production
whatever his
values
name
are
is,
something else.
the guy who does the kind of one-off random videos all over the place, Scott, whatever his name is, he went to one of these Amazon warehouses. They had, I think it was 2,000 or so units on the floor, all of them individual AI.
Well, I
They
mean,
knew
this
where
is
to
where the
go and
whole
how to
wage
do some other
cage
stuff.
thing, the wage
Well,
cage
yeah,
meme came from.
Hold on, because this is that's a very
right.
different AI that
I
we're
was
talking.
just gonna go grab that as a video to throw into the links. I'm not gonna try and drag us into that one too.
Yeah, fair
Yeah,
enough.
that's
But
that's another matter entirely. Yeah.
Right.
AI in the warehouse is not AI on the road.
No, no.
Correct. Not by
And
a long shot.
yeah, I mean, let's forego that is that rabbit hole. But the question is not whether or not they'll be willing to do it; it's whether or not you can manage to live through it, right? Because you will run into a problem that not all of this will happen all at once, right? So, that's not a
Well, a perfect analogy there
massive
is
important
the wall between East and West Berlin was not built in a day. It was just, one day, hey, you're going to need your papers if you cross over. The next day, oh, hey, we've got these guards. You know, the day following, oh, we've started the foundation over here, but, you know, you're still free to go left and right. And then, you know, a few months down the line, there's a big fucking wall.
Yeah. There's a slightly different problem when you're running a business, though, right? So let's say, because they're not idiots, what they're going to do is automate the major hubs first, because they're not idiots, right?
Well, yeah,
Sorry, the guy's name was Tom Scott.
Thank you.
Oh,
yeah,
that makes much more sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, they automate the major hubs first, and they're still moving stuff in traditional trucking method for everything else. Because why would you do it any other way, right? The problem that you are now running into is that you are all those costs that we went over are now exploding, right? I will forego that correction needing to be made. It's totally fair to me that it's close enough.
No. I'm gonna go out and say it right now. The video I was thinking of is not Amazon. That is a grocery store in England. But it's the same deal.
Same principle.
And I was mistaken. Definitely, it's like Amazon's warehousing, but it's not Amazon.
So I'm not intimately familiar with it, despite having been following Tom Scott for years. But regardless, you get this problem where now it is no longer just $2 billion, right?
Sure.
It's $2 billion plus however many years you have to run traditional trucking, with overlapping costs, and this problem of, you know, second order costs gets progressively more out of hand the more that you do this. And so it becomes less of a problem of whether or not Amazon is willing to do it, as it is whether or not Amazon can even soak it, which I don't say as though Amazon is about to run out of money tomorrow, but somebody else showing up being willing to lobby the government to, you know, get all the cool benefits that Amazon's got is a pretty likely scenario, specifically if they ever look vulnerable.
In terms of shipping costs, obviously this is, you know, random site off the internet, and I mean, you can go to their sources, etc. But this is through 2020, release date February 2021 data. The shipping costs for Amazon is over $60 billion.
Yeah.
So if we're talking $10 billion.
Well, yeah, say they could take $10 billion of that cost, inboard it for $3 to $4 billion.
Well, this is going to be, again, this is where the problem comes in. Because, well, okay. So part of the reason that Amazon gets allowed to do what it does is because they have an agreement with the post office to handle a bunch of their property for what amounts to free.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've got a sweetheart deal.
And so you're going to have to, I mean, let's say that's somehow takes into account what the deal that they've got with the post office. You are now going to transfer a thing that yesterday was effectively free into a cost measure, right? And so now you're going to have a cost in perpetuity that you didn't have.
Backing that up another step further in terms of time here, this is from 2006 to 2016.
Sure.
Shipping revenue versus outbound shipping cost. So we can start to look into how the cost might evolve in that front. If Amazon, for instance, did so well with AI trucking that they started to invest further into that themselves, you could easily see how they might sell that expertise to other companies.
Well, that would definitely happen, right? That would be the cost mitigation that is absolutely required for them to do this.
Right.
You know, and the first people they'd go to is Walmart. You know, let's not kid ourselves here.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's the largest employer in the United States.
So, you know, there would be some cost mitigation they can do with this, but then, you know, Walmart is going to have a much bigger problem even than Amazon is, right? If only because while they do have distribution centers that they could, you know, link up, their distribution network is very different. It is sort of a tree, right? You know, it grows up, out, and then has ends. Amazon's has a lot of internal recirculation, so simply linking up the distribution centers is a big deal for Amazon. It's not as big of a deal for Walmart. And so
the Amazon example here, I mean, for any of the listeners who might be familiar with these things, Walmart being more of a tree is an efficiency measure. That it gets rid of a lot of kind of those circulation kind of issues at the cost of efficiency, whereas the web nature of Amazon incurs the penalty of having to solve the traveling salesman problem.
Yeah, basically Amazon is hyper efficient and Walmart is hyper diversified. Really basically putting it out there that way.
Sure.
Sure. I'll accept that. But what you end up with then is that the cost is going to be orders of magnitude higher for Walmart than it is for Amazon. And so that is going to cause them the problem that, all of the problems that Amazon is looking into with this of like,
well, yeah.
Okay,
So I picked Amazon specifically because between the two employers, Amazon has a better draw for tech-oriented personnel, and they've got Silicon Valley and Seattle and so on that they draw in from. So in terms of how they're going to get the people to orchestrate the change in infrastructure and then implement it, the personnel they'd be drawing from would not be necessarily, you're going to have someone actually install the thing with a hammer. We'll put it like that.
you do,
But then
right?
you've got to have somebody do the back end of it, and Amazon has their global web services.
Yes.
So they would handle that part of it better than say Walmart would.
Yeah,
Walmart
invariably
goes to them for that.
Yeah, invariably they're going to have some menial, like, oh, we're dedicating 0.01% of Amazon Web Services to running this.
Right.
They don't care.
I mean, but other companies run their services on Amazon's web services. AWS is a wide variety of customers for this thing.
Make no mistake, if Amazon pioneers this, it will be just like AWS, where everybody has stopped running most of their own web traffic and just went to Amazon.
Unless you're running Azure or something.
Right. And so they just went, you take care of this. It's no longer our problem. How much do we owe you per year? Right. And that would be the way of it. The problem is that, I know why everybody picks Amazon when I talk to anybody about this. And it's because Amazon is by far, leaps and bounds, the single best example of where this even might happen. The problems are not non-existent for Amazon, not the least of which will become corporate liability for car accidents.
So that's still going to be a major issue. What I would probably end up see happening, in the near-term future is not a retrofit of roads so much as a streamlining of where municipalities might be lobbied to implement either legal changes or infrastructural changes that would guarantee the non-necessity of so many legal changes.
Yeah, it is entirely possible that
an automated transport system in parallel, not necessarily integrated directly into manual transport.
Well, actually, Arizona, I think, is one of the places where they're testing a lot of this out, and I think we might see either a parallel system or possibly just a different kind of route entirely, almost something akin to like how our train tracks run.
Right.
Well, if that's the case, then the question is why haven't trains killed everything?
Oh, you have to go to all these different municipalities. I mean, let's just take the ISP example here. Right. You're going to ask these places for asphalt that they don't have.
Oh yeah.
To allow you to put in a road nobody wants.
Well,
and you're gonna have to have a financial incentive to do it, which will probably end up being someone's.
My threads are doing Iron Man numbers. I don't care anymore.
Ryan,
my threads are doing Iron Man numbers, and I don't care anymore.
I want to cut my face. I want to cut my face.
Where they went to towns and they said, we're just building stuff, and if you don't get out of our way, we'll just go to the next town. Because
that's the other side of it.
Something will happen in that area. Those tracks will need.
Look at Elon Musk. Elon Musk left California and said, "I'm taking this postage stamp of a city in Texas and turning it into my next tech center."
Yeah,
and that is currently happening.
Indeed.
Or you look at Hyperloop. They're putting their testing center in like the heart of West Virginia.
Or hell, in my own industry here, for polymer processing, the Antec conference, the triannual Antec trade show, used to be held up in Chicago, and now it's permanently down in Orlando. Because they don't have unions screwing up the cost of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Very few places in the country can handle that much current going into different buildings. And it just happens that the second best one, I guess, was the one in Orlando, or the one they hadn't tried yet. And they managed to get enough power in there, and it worked just fine. So the unions in Chicago screwed them out of having the entire plant's worth of polymer processing show up.
Yeah,
That's comedy.
To do trade deals,
Well,
That's
and
comedy.
that is really common. And by the way, what ends up pushing this, right? To roll us way back, if you want to go all this workers' rights and think whatever you want of unions and how they began. We can argue that some other day, but unions
I think they had a purpose.
Unions are the embodiment of workers' rights and increased wages, right? And so, look, went to Orlando instead of Chicago because of the unions. That's what drives this. Now, again, that said, a lot of this. Now, make no mistake, as gas basically doubles in price, if you it will be a static cost regardless, right? Like presumably these things are going to be gas powered, or I don't know, maybe they'll just be covered.
Well, so I would assume at the start here they're going to be gas powered.
Yeah, that was actually something else I wanted to bring up, because if we go electric, there's the whole infrastructure issue with that doesn't really exist.
So I would go ahead and say your Gen 1, maybe Gen 2 fleets, the first 5 years, you're going to have gas powered as dominant. There's going to be probably phasing in for electric power as, if it's a parallel transport economy, then you're going to have electric built into it from ground up as it evolves. If it's not there at the start, then it's going to be phased in eventually.
Giant problems with trucking electric. Giant.
Yes, there
are. And
reliability is a big problem.
Liability is the least of your worries.
No, reliability.
Reliability. Yeah. Yes, that's definitively one of them. But the other is that you start to run into this problem when you're trucking a lot of weight and trying to get, you're moving a lot of weight and you're trying to move it with an electric car, that you get really, really serious diminishing returns on size and quantity of batteries versus additional power. And semis are the peak of this.
The funny thing is, my original thesis work was on storage of hydrogen for electric power and transport.
That might have made this very possible.
That was one of those things that was going to be the kind of the foot in the ass that would get that whole thing moving, was how do we get enough energy density on these vehicles?
Yeah.
And it was chemical means instead of just a battery storage mechanism.
Yeah.
And it that's still in progress, however that's going.
Yeah, batteries have their place, but they are not the solution to electrics.
We're still about 10 years out from having hydrogen storage on that scale viable as a suggestion for a new kind of transportation infrastructure. So we're not there yet.
Honda built one almost 15 years ago now.
Toyota as well.
The hydrogen cars exist. The thing is that the main storage right now is terrible.
Well,
it leaks out the tank out the sides of the tank. That's the bad part.
Yes, but I mean that's
all things considered.
All things considered, a lesser problem, right? I mean, you just stack gaskets until you're happy, but
sure.
I mean, that's what that's.
I'm deeper into this territory than you are by a mile, and that's not a bad thing. So I'm not dismissing you.
Look,
you have a point. At the end of the day, that's effectively kind of what's happening.
It's gonna get churched up a lot from what I said, but they go.
The material itself is the problem. They use HDPE, so like a milk jug kind of plastic.
Yeah.
And they use a high strength carbon fiber composite to wrap that so they can handle the pressure. The problem is that the hydrogen's a tiny molecule. It flies right through the sides of the tank. So the alternative is to use 10 kilograms of steel for every kilogram of hydrogen.
Well, that's reasonable.
Well, yeah, right. So that's what they use outside a physics building. It's not what you use in a truck.
No.
And so to get around that, I used polymer that is like 4 to 7 times stronger on a density normalized basis. So per pound, the stuff is the same strength, but it's like 7 times lighter.
Yeah.
So that would get the job done finally. That breaks it to the point where you can get the job done. And then we looked at recycling and all kinds of stuff. And the main advantage is not permeable to hydrogen. So when you say stacking gaskets, effectively, at the end of the day, you just have to have enough stuff in the way. That's the steel tank solution.
Yeah.
Which is what they're doing right now. So any of those hydrogen powered cars, to prevent them from being a giant liability disaster, they sacrifice mileage by using a tank that actually works.
Yes, and it does work. It is a solution, just
it's
not
just
the
a
best
shitty
solution. Yeah.
Well,
it's like putting batteries in.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we should be putting generators in electric cars, but but then that kind of
straw to blow into.
diesel powered, ideally.
Hey, good news. Come 2024, all cars will have to have a straw that you blow into to get them to start.
That's true.
Thank you, 13 turncoats.
Swear to God, I'm never going to buy another car built after the 70s again. They'll, if they force over the electric thing, first of all, they're going to kill half the country. But
oh yeah. Well, the thing is, it's funny because the electric thing kind of could work, but it's just that it won't work without the power generation required, which is going to come from nuclear energy. There's no way around that. You just simply do not have enough stuff elsewise. You don't have enough renewable stuff to get the job done without having nuclear.
Are you saying that we won't be able to charge our cars up on wind and solar every day?
Well, I mean, if you find a liberal and you go ahead and pull their head out of their ass, so get enough wind from both ends. But no,
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Fair enough. Yeah, good point.
But that is another giant problem. There was a thing a bunch of years ago. A horrible person as he is on basically every front. Gates had built a nuke the size of a water heater that he was distributing across the planet for a while, and the premise was this thing would power a whole city.
So there's a floating barge that they were dragging around the coast of Russia.
Yeah,
as well. I think it was modeled off of that project itself.
Exactly.
And that one has actually been a success over in Russia, but of course the main problem is the reach of the power grid is not sufficient, and they're having trouble getting the power from the coast, where it's kind of the edge, the periphery of the power system, back into the main city, because they just don't have the infrastructure built in for that kind of power transfer.
Exactly.
So it's a trickle.
But the shtick with that is what you're going to end up needing is like millions of those, given the size of the U.S.
Oh yeah,
sprinkled all over the place.
But we could do that.
We could do that, but we absolutely don't want to.
Well, so that's the interesting disconnect between the people who are looking at the power system as it is and trying to figure out how the hell we're gonna, I mean, it's like looking at a big brain field, going, how are we gonna feed all these people? You got to get power to everybody, and so the engineering side of thing, everybody wants to do it. Everybody wants, modular nuclear reactors is the way to go. We want to get, that'll be our stopgap between now and fusion. And,
I mean, they are rolling them out in France
fusion,
now.
It's what we want to do, and the problem is you're gonna, the NIMBYism is completely understandable because everyone's still freaked out after Fukushima and at the 3 Mile Island.
Haven't you seen Godzilla?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, I mean, I was actually in the middle of watching the new one this afternoon.
Well, then you realize how dangerous nuclear power could be.
Exactly.
Oh, it creates very bad CGI.
I wish that the Godzilla thing was a totally unrealistic thing to say, but I mean, go listen to the people who are panicked about nuclear. That's basically what it is.
Right. Yeah, but I totally get it. Like the same thing with, I mean, and not to draw us off on another tangent.
Do you want another Chernobyl here in America?
I get the same idea of, same kind of respect for their hesitancy as the people who don't want the mRNA vaccines or any of that nonsense. So, if that NIMBYism isn't going to go away immediately, and it's going to go away by listening to people and then talking to them, or talking with them, I should say. Talking at them is what we've been doing the past 2 years for the pandemic. That doesn't work. Period.
I would say more yelling and scolding at them, but
Yeah, sure.
Here's the primary difference, right? Is because I am one of them evil people that just won't take the vaccine.
Look, here's the thing: it's your personal decision. It's not my body.
And that's the problem, right?
There's consequences to everybody doing that, mind you, but that's the things affecting everybody. Whatever, you have to convince the individual to do the thing they want to do.
Very, very different issues, right? Because the problem that I have with this vaccine is a cost-benefit analysis, right?
Sure.
Which is the other side that I come on with nukes. Like let's go ahead and celebrate Chernobyl as though the Chernobyl reactor has any bearing on any modern nuclear facility.
That thing was a disaster in its own right as it was, and then they decided to run it in the dumbest way possible. And
it was like a perfect storm of bad ideas.
Let's light off M60s in the gas station. Hey, why is it on fire?
Right.
Well,
I mean, despite what Steve would say, I still think graphite is a fucking retarded. Pardon my French here. A fucking retarded moderator for neutrons. As a structure, like they made the structure of the thing, like they piped water through it as a coolant, but the thing that was inside there moderating neutrons wasn't just the water; it was the graphite, like pencil lead. And they wonder why the thing lit on fire after oxygen got in there, and it was like thousands of degrees.
Are you saying that carbon can burn?
Weird.
That's so strange.
Oh yeah.
This is the shtick, right? Let's go ahead and celebrate all of. And I spent a lot of time reading about Fukushima too when that happened.
Yeah.
And I happen to know a guy who works on nukes, so I called him up and I went, "All right, makes sense for me." And he was like, "It's basically Chernobyl all over again, right?
Oh yeah.
We did the dumbest things possible. We did it for."
But that's the crazy thing, though, is they didn't do all of the dumbest things. They did most of them.
Yeah, that's
like
fair.
the fuel, like the generators were well placed until you realized they were on like right next to the dock, and then the fuel was in the right place until we realized it was on the dock.
Yeah, right.
Instead of if they moved it on to the other side of the generators, they probably wouldn't have had nearly as much of a problem. But tough shit.
Exactly. And so, what you find in nuclear energy is that most of the times, and certainly, I don't know every detail of everything that's ever gone wrong with a nuke. Most of the times that anything has gone wrong with a nuke, which thus the moderating term most, by the way, what you find is that this is the biggest stack of bad decisions that you possibly can get to get a negative outcome, which presumably is not only happening where things actually went wrong. Presumably there are other people who are making bad decisions, and yet with thousands of nukes all over the world, this is not happening on a daily basis.
So here's another thing to point out is we had all these fail-safes that are put in by people who are smarter than the people who screwed up. And what we've ended up with is very few serious real disasters.
Exactly.
It's the amount of the leakage that happened at 3 Mile Island is not measurable. For example, that was the biggest disaster the U.S. faced. This was after Chernobyl.
That's our big white whale, and it's really not much of anything.
And as a fuck up, it wasn't that bad. If we look at Fukushima over in Japan as a design mistake, I mean they basically got caught and pants down in a once in a century event. Maybe it might have been a once in a millennium event.
Well, and
they had that bad luck.
That's the other thing is even with all those bad decisions discussed earlier, it still took, more than a little bit to cause a serious problem. And again, friend that works on nukes was like, just so you know, there are new nuclear plants. They've existed for, I think, 30 years or something like that. They're substantially better, safer, etc. He gave me a little bit of rundown on them, and I went, well, that sounds like, and look, I'm not a nuclear engineer, but, that sounds a lot like, basically, we've covered all the problems that we reasonably could exist, and these things, you would have to basically hit it with a nuke to turn it into a nuclear bomb, but you've already got one there, so it seems a little bit...
The thing is, people think about meltdowns, they don't realize that you aren't going to have a nuclear explosion. That will never happen. It's just the way that the physics works out. The thing that will happen is you'll get contamination in the surrounding area, maybe. And the way we've designed systems since things like Chernobyl, where the fire plume was allowed to spread nuclear ash everywhere.
Right.
The way things have been designed since that generation of reactor, so the generation before 3 Mile Island, you cannot do that anymore. It's one of those fail-safe things. There is such a thing as fail deadly, by the way. It's just that typically happens to be more of a normal than you would like to suspect. But that's why fail-safe is so special.
But this is, is the shtick, is that nukes are not, I mean, I presume the benefits of nukes can just be assumed.
Sure.
Right? Like electricity and shitloads of it. You know?
Well, it's not just shitloads of it. It's thousands of years of shitloads of it.
Oh yeah.
That's what we have.
It's like
We
one
have
fuel load is
thousands
going
of
to
years.
run you 70-ish years.
And I saw someone on Twitter actually the other day who was proud that he opposed nuclear energy for the past however many years, because the remaining like 7 or whatever it is in Germany went offline at the start of this year.
Yeah.
It's like, you shithead. And he's sitting there saying how, you release so much carbon from refining the fuel required.
God,
if you powered that process with the nuclear fuel, then you wouldn't have to spend any fucking carbon.
Yeah. Once you have the first one, you can make the second one for basically nothing. But even then, the discussions of new nuke plants, their preferred method of acquiring fuel is going to where we've been storing all the old fuel and shoveling it into a truck and putting it into the new nuke reactors, right? So
that's the thing is we also have all these downstream. So what people don't realize is when you burn up, so you generate your fuel rod, you've got about 5% fissile material in it. You actually destroy about 2% of that material. You get energy out of it. It becomes downstream products. The rest of it is still fissile uranium that is just not at the right density, so to speak, and it doesn't have the right kind of cross section for it to react the way you want it to. It's more efficient to just pull out the rod and put a new one in. And there's a pattern of circulation within the core that as you're moving the rods, you're shifting them out and phasing them out. You move them to different locations to optimize the heat transfer, etc.
Yeah, sure.
But at the end of the day, you've only burned out. At the end of the day, you've only burned a little of the fuel that you spent all that energy to put in there. Yeah. But the amount of energy it took to put that in there is dwarfed by what comes out of it. And you're only burning, again, about 2% of the stuff that matters, which is 5%. So that's not very enriched stuff. And I'm sure that these are a little bit rounded off numbers. I'm sure Steve would pull his hair out. But again, at the end of the day, you have all this fuel, and you can go, as you're saying, go down there and just get it from the fuel dump. That's basically what we could do. And it's not just the stuff that burns slow, like uranium. People are used to thinking about that as slow-burning fuel. It's very slow. The half-life is on the order of like 10,000 years.
Yeah.
There's stuff like, there's much more fissile materials that would happily radiate away their energy if we would let them. And put them in the right conditions. It just happens that those reactors are a little more annoying to build and we a little more annoying to control, but we can do it. And more importantly, we could use those same downstream products to turn upstream products into the more fissile materials we want to put into a reactor. So we can take
above and beyond that too. These same processes too could be used to desalinate ocean water for people in California.
Yeah.
That's unreasonable to have happen.
Well, that is
anywhere on planet Earth that hates nukes, California.
Right?
That is sexist, Evan. I don't know why you're talking about that.
Well, I hate California, so it's fine.
Anyway, all of this was all of this was the comparison to vaccinations, which I apologize for whatever platform is going to hate you for this, but the cost benefits there are pretty gigantic, and the vaccinations are not, right?
So the one thing you'll find here is so I'm generally speaking here, no one here is an anti-vaxxer by any stretch, and I wouldn't accuse anybody here of being an anti-vaxxer. And it's whatever you put in your own body is up to you, as far as I'm concerned. Once you become an adult, and you can stipulate the rational and reasonable bounds by which you're going to judge the decision. And beyond that, we just look at the technical merits of things. I fall down on the side where I think the cost benefit says that mRNA vaccines are a net positive. Steve fell on the side where he says it's not a good positive for him, and it largely depends on your circumstances.
Sure.
As well.
And
generally, I would say get the vaccine, but again, my real answer for that kind of thing is talk to your doctor, because I'm not your doctor. I don't know you.
Well, and
people should be doing that.
In the world of disclaimers that should be made, none of this is medical advice.
Right.
You should probably not listen to a couple of assholes on the internet talk about whether or not it's a good idea for you to get any medical treatment of
but
any
even like
variety.
between friends, even with like talking directly to my friends who I would say, if they need to get the vaccine, I'd tell them, hey, dumbass, go get a vaccine. What I tell them first is go talk to your effing doctor. Because it might be someone I've grown up with. It's
Yeah,
like I
who
know
knows?
most of your
You might
medical
have
problems,
Guillain-Barré
but you should still
syndrome,
talk to them.
and if you take the vaccine, you could be actually actively damaging yourself.
Indeed.
Right. So this kind of stuff comes up all the time, and I think that a lot of people have been making medical decisions based off of political information,
Oh yeah,
Well,
which is
that's
horrible.
definitively the case.
Cutting their nose off to spite their face, and you shouldn't not take the vaccine because the other guy says you need to take it or you're not allowed to go into a sandwich shop. I think that we should focus on the not being allowed to go into the sandwich shop part.
Well, that's definitively true.
Right.
But and forgive me because I basically never get to talk to anybody who's like particularly pro go take the vaccine. So I'm just gonna keep poking you about this.
Oh yeah, no, please do. Yeah.
But what when you do that cost benefit analysis, what are we cost and benefiting here?
Well, so we can look at the mechanism of action and what the general product what are you producing in your body? How are you impacting the same machinery versus not the same machinery? The mRNA vaccines are basically just better at getting the job done that, say, a modified adenovirus vaccine would do, like the Johnson & Johnson one. So instead of having the entire genome let's go back a little bit in vaccines.
Sure.
We've got vaccines that we started off with were just weakened.
Look, I
I
got a smallpox on my left shoulder. I'm there with you.
So that's a weakened virus. So that is not as virulent or lethal. It's not as maybe it just doesn't replicate as well. Then there's the inactivated vaccines. So that was when we just fried them with gamma rays, and then we said, okay, we have to have a larger dose of stuff that we throw into someone's body, but at least it's not going to replicate. So there's no chance. Let's say there's a minimal chance of actually developing a viral infection from that because the vast majority are dead.
Yeah,
probably not going to actually get a chance.
It's a statistical zero. It's not an actual zero, but it's a statistical zero.
It's a pretty darn close to 0-0. So then in the 1980s, we developed the modified adenovirus vaccines. So that's when we take the decoration on the outside of a virus that we don't like, and we throw it onto a virus that we know we can tolerate pretty well. And then that is a live virus vaccine. Yeah. Then there's also the dead variety of that, but again, the dose is so much larger, and we know that generally people can tolerate these vaccines. It's a mild cold kind of. It's less than rhinovirus in terms of actual pissing off your immune system. And so then about the corner of the millennium there, we started looking in at coronaviruses like 1998 or whatever it was. Trying to figure them out, see if maybe we could get away getting around some of those or the more lethal ones. We had SARS and MERS in the meantime. Mid 2000s, early 2010s, we got into looking at mRNA as a way of controlling cancer. Yeah. It just happens that it's easier to target your immune system against something that doesn't look like itself, as with cancer targets. So the serendipity there was, hey, let's just make these mRNA vaccines for going after the virus that your body will recognize anyway. So the way that works is instead of decorating the outside of a live virus like adenovirus, you just take the snippet of the RNA from the virus that makes the protein that your body will recognize, and that's the only bit you inject into somebody. But unlike a dead virus vaccine, it can replicate until the RNA degrades after anywhere
however
between
many
5
iterations.
Hours. Yeah, so you get a few iterations out of it, and then the RNA mangles itself because it's not stable.
But to make the point, that mangled RNA is still in your system.
Well, it gets digested and thrown out.
Yeah, I mean, like as long as you pee, that will not be a perpetual problem.
So
it'll make its way out.
Though back to the talk to your doctor question, or back to talk to your doctor point. If you don't pee, talk to your doctor.
Yes.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, that's definitely fair.
Unless you already know why and you've already talked to him, if you don't need to ring him up every hour and say, "Doctor, I still can't pee." All right, so the point is the mRNA. We've progressively moved from giving someone a live virus towards giving them only enough of the virus to make their immune system stimulate a response against it.
Yes.
So there's no chance of getting an actual viral infection from an mRNA vaccine. And more importantly, you can now give this to people who are immunocompromised because they have no chance of developing a viral infection from it. It takes advantage of the same exact machinery that a live virus vaccine will take advantage of. To Steve's credit here on this one, he agrees with me down to this point, and he has a very good opposing opinion here, and that is that oftentimes with these live viral vaccines, the cell dies at the end of the process because it fills up with viruses and then falls apart.
Right.
So the one that had all the viral action going on, it goes away. But again, if we look at the prevalence of viral inserts in the human genome over past couple 100,000 years, past few billion years even, you can see where viral genetic material was integrated into the human genome over time, or not as in our ancestors' genome. It came with us.
The shorthand is good enough. I got you.
Yeah, but if you look at the predominance, at the prevalence of where you have receptor sites in your body, if you just look at a numbers perspective here, there's a very tiny minority of those that exist where the gonads are. So propagation into the next generation has to happen from viral insertion there. Which means that if it's happening there, it is happening everywhere else that it can happen under the same conditions, which is a lot larger of your body than you might suspect. All of your lungs, your several other organs like kidneys and certainly your testes. But the point is, if we're worried about viral insertions, these happen anyway. I'm not saying that they happen as often as, say, they could happen with mRNA vaccines. So that is a point against them. There is that possibility, but if
they
you also
are
look at
kind of made for the purpose of doing that.
But they're not. That's the thing.
Well, they're not. No, but I mean they're very good.
If you look at the way that if you look at the way that mechanism plays out anyway, you realize that you've already skipped that step with the mRNA vaccines. So the viral RNA is complement RNA. It comes in, it has to be reverse transcribed and then turned into messenger RNA, which is what the mRNA vaccines are. It's the step after they've been turned into DNA, then back into RNA. So that reverse transcriptase step is part of the viral package. That the virus enters the cell and it triggers that mechanism. The mRNA is the product after the fact. So for that to then undergo some sort of insertion mechanism, you'd have to have a different way of reversing that process. And if you ran it through reverse transcriptase, which it will not do because it's the wrong side of the helix, mind you, but if, say, you had a broken protein and it happened anyway, then it'll be included as an incorrect transcription. You'd have to have another mistake later when you read that back out of the DNA for it to do anything. It otherwise becomes junk. A lot of the DNA is junk because of that very reason.
Well, that would explain why we see largely these things are tolerated by people. But we do see some very, very scary results.
Well, some people, and Steve brought this up as a follow-up study that made him a little bit more okay with the mRNA vaccines as well. And this is that some people were not getting intramuscular injections; they were getting intra-arterial or intravenous injections.
Yeah, when the mRNA vaccine hits your blood, that's very bad.
So it's what they found is a much higher association of that kind of mistake with a cardiac event.
As a matter of fact, it could be that many of our heart-related issues could come from bad injections. Now, we might not ever get an answer to that because they don't even want to address the question.
Well, the main problem is if you look at it as a retrospective, you can't find out because nobody knows. You don't have controls in the injection.
Consider the magnitude of that problem, right? I mean, where would you even start? Yeah.
Well, you have to start with a controlled study, and the problem is, again, if you look at it as a retrospective, trying to do correlation analysis, you try to say, okay, how well does this study match up to the pattern we're seeing in reality, and how much of that can we extract from the overall pattern without knowing it a priori, what fraction it is, how to add it in there, how much that curve really is because of this problem. And the main issue is that you don't have anybody tracking, you don't have a video every injection. You can't see if every doctor did it exactly right, and then correlate that with a patient having a problem. The tracking on that just doesn't exist. So you'd have to do a study on its own and then guess after the fact, and we just wouldn't have a good answer anyway.
Considering that to the sum total question of heart issues, whether or not it relies to this, a lot of it seems to be years down the road. Is the correlation that at least the people who make that claim make is that we have heart issues as we have them related to vaccines because stacked over 25 years, this happened X number of times and each damaged the heart at least a little bit, and then you ended up.
Well, here's another thing to bring in though is people don't realize the thing that actually beyond the botched injections. If we look at what other mechanisms are at play, the main mechanism that people tend to go back to, or main issue people go back to, is pericarditis, myocarditis. And I made it a point on this show before.
We have discussed that, important. And it is actually fairly normal in and of itself, but that does require its own caveat.
So this important thing is more than 10% of flu cases present with myocarditis. At least 10% clinically present with myocarditis, and it presents typically as just chest discomfort. So that discomfort you get on your left side, a little bit of chest discomfort, that's generally going to be your myocarditis. The vast majority of myocarditis does not require hospitalization or a doctor's visit, any of that. You don't even know what the hell it is. You just feel uncomfortable. But some people get, and it's because your body releases interferon when its immune system is stimulated. So the same exact thing would happen, but worse if you actually got a viral infection than relative to the vaccine. There's less time that the interferon's released with a vaccine, and it's released at a much lower concentration than with a viral infection. So prolonged higher concentration exposure to interferon, which is produced by your own body, can't do anything about it, causes more muscle damage. It always causes muscle damage. Most of that is repairable, by the way. So that's the muscle and joint pain you feel with a bad cold or flu. That's interferon. So that will happen with the vaccine or the virus. The virus is just worse about that part. So if we're talking apples to apples, oranges to oranges comparison here, on that front, the vaccine is simply better for you than the actual infection. If you're talking about getting immunity one way or another.
Oh yeah, hard and fast numbers.
Avoid getting any kind of exposure.
Herein is the problem: is we're pretty well to immunity's off the table.
Well, by using any currently available vaccine, anyway.
Well, so that's the other thing is, if we're talking about vaccines today, I would say that if you're looking whether or not you should get vaccinated, I would look at hospitalization and death numbers, not the infection numbers, which is unfortunate because herd immunity was the goal originally.
You're going to have a serious problem with that, right?
Well, we're losing the battle on this because we're in the middle of the gray area of immune evasion on the way down to a resistant strain of the virus. At that point, it doesn't matter how many times you take the same vaccine, the virus will not be affected by it.
Well, look,
it looks like with vaccines. Omicron, we've actually crossed that line.
Hold on a minute, because that's
we haven't crossed it yet.
Right? That is an issue, right? But presumably, if that was the hold-up issue, then people would have been crusading against the influenza vaccine that people take like 8 times a year.
Romneys, yeah, they need
So clearly
Romneys to start having more sex tapes,
those are new vaccines.
Like give these Kardashians a run for their money.
Indeed, they are. But if it was
the vaccine we're taking right now was made for the original virus, and we have the virus has evolved away from that.
I can get in the good angles.
Again, if it was simply the repetition of the vaccine, then that other vaccines require repetition would have provoked this, right?
So
if we were being honest, right?
There's a temporal nature to this that is often ignored. We talk about the vaccine today. Oh, why is it not effective today? It's because time has elapsed where the virus has evolved.
Well, actually, yeah, we did go into that a bit early on, where we just discussed this specifically. What we have now was designed for the wild type and the alpha type.
Yes. Yeah, and so for those, it provided what's called sterilizing immunity. It prevented an infection. It stopped it cold. It prevented transmission, etc. Now, the problem was we immediately got away from that, and as soon as we got into the following up variants, the potential for herd immunity was there at the beginning. We have lost that since that first couple variants. We're now at the point where we're not going to get herd immunity without a new vaccine.
So herein is the shtick, right? Yeah. Is that one? There is very little evidence that the initial vaccine provided initial immunity, right? It is just a thing that gets said. And
we looked into the numbers of this. We did go into the numbers on the. We pulled up the brief, etc., on the show and went through it.
Well, here's your problem.
Much to Steve's annoyance.
Again, herein lies the problem. Your data is only as good as your definitions, and the definitions that we get are often very bad. Not only are they very bad, but they are directly contradicted often by follow-up definitions, revisions of reports, etc. For example, we heard any number of times that, in fact, you can go find a headline that says this right now if you so insist. 98% of hospitalizations. You pick your number, but it's a big number, right? 90 whatever percent of hospitalizations are from the unvaccinated. And then when you trace that back through the meta study into the original study in 3 or 4 times, what you find out is that unvaccinated means like within 6 weeks of being vaccinated. Now,
so that is of initial vaccination. So the reason why is because you have a second dose that comes out later, but the actual. Sorry, that has to be ignored. That's spam. So the actual end date at which you would say someone is vaccinated is 2 weeks post most recent vaccination.
Right.
Although there has been some serious fuckery with that in the VAERS system.
Sure. Well, if you look at some people though who are getting, say, vaccine injuries or getting infected and they're calling it breakthrough even though it wasn't, it's because they're getting an infection because they had an exposure like days before they got vaccinated, and they developed the symptoms several days after getting vaccinated. And
that is definitively not true. The further that you go down the timeline,
certainly later on now we're having less of that as an issue. But just to point out, there was a time where that was being shoved forward as proof that the vaccines weren't effective.
Well,
and that's just plain out silly.
What you're saying there was put forward as a theory, and I am unaware of any actual evidence of it. Right? It was
of people developing symptoms shortly after vaccination.
Yeah, right. So you get vaccinated on Tuesday, and you have COVID on Wednesday. Chances are good you got it before the vaccination, right?
Exactly.
If you get vaccinated on Tuesday, and 8 days from Tuesday,
I'm just helping to bracket the discussion here in terms of because the point that you were getting to earlier about things being an issue, fully vaccinated being defined differently over time is also a problem.
So
I would say that you need to talk about specific doses and specific dose schedules when you want to say whether or not there's a problem there.
This is a thing that has been a problem since the initial vaccine rollout, though, right?
It's a common theme on this show that there's been a major problem with the communication of information surrounding this.
Sure.
It's a major problem for the public that this has been so badly communicated to them. What is going on, how the data should be interpreted, or what the data is that's available.
Again, though, that's a problem that predates the vaccine, though. Call it an anecdote if you'd like, but the guy with 15 bullets in his chest that got listed as dying of COVID is indicative of an actual problem.
So, yes, but I also like to go ahead and point out something here. When you look at when you look at the report from autopsy, you have conditions present at death. You don't have necessarily cause of death. Mm-hmm. So you should expect that if you take all causes of death and you add up all causes of death that happened over the year, you will have way over 100%. You'll have several thousand%. And it's because these are overlapping curves, overlapping distributions, if you will.
So
and having multiple things listed on your form, like you can say that there's going to be something that's listed as a cause of death, but that's not the autopsy's job. That is, coroner or whoever else.
There is evidence that is not what is being done, right? Because look, you make a reasonable point, sure. For all.
Well, I mean, what's the primary cause of death in the United States every year?
Fat, one way or another.
Well, I mean, sure, but remember that's a downstream definition here. What is the actual cause of death?
I think heart failure still owns. Yeah.
And why
however,
is that? So
hold
we
on,
know that the cause of heart
hold on a
failure
minute.
oftentimes is just being old or fat.
Indeed, right? However,
Right. But we don't list
what
that.
what you are seeing is indicative that that is not what's happening, and because there was a financial incentive to do what actually happened, people are more than a little wary, right? We went to the
So you
hospital and
can,
we said, "Look, if someone
yeah,
dies of COVID, we'll give you X amount of dollars," and this is why so
they
many
get
people.
X amount of dollars. Every public hospital and private that has to deal with death, they get X amount of dollars per bed occupied per the unit time for occupation of the bed.
Yes,
So their goal is to get a patient in, heal them, get them out. And
yes,
what happens oftentimes is that small amount of money that the government provides doesn't cover shit. It's
usually
just
the
the way
case.
it is. It's just the way it is. And when you look at the resources that are consumed by a COVID patient in hospital,
Well,
actual COVID patient, whatever, we'll just assume, take it for sake of argument, they are a person in the hospital just because they got sick with COVID.
sure.
The amount of resources that are put into treating that patient, it's going to dwarf whatever they're going to get in terms of a kickback from government.
Well,
And
yes.
especially when you include the beds they
Well,
have to
Joe,
deoccupy on that floor to make room for that quarantine.
that is substantially less important than all the other associated costs. But herein is the thing. This is why there are so many problems with the data, right? And why I say that the earlier suggestion, right, that even though if you
Sure.
you would end up with, probably
Well,
an order
I
of
guess a
magnitude.
better thing to ask you now that I've asked you about the heart failure thing versus, what is the actual cause of death? And we'd say being fat or old is going to be the likely answer.
Right.
If you look at a person who dies after they get a flu infection, they die in the hospital. You say, okay, what is the cause of death listed on the form? It's not going to
Surely,
be the flu.
well,
It's going to be their heart gave out probably, or
there
you know,
therein is the problem, and how
or they'll
incentives
have
affect
multiple
the data.
organ failure. But
Well,
they'll also have listed
hold
on
on.
the form that they had the flu.
Well, we can actually
Except
take
that they
some
don't.
comfort in this specific note because finally someone is going to be doing the numbers. Funny enough, out of New York, they're actually going to be looking
Oh
into this
boy,
specifically. So I don't know if
all
I'd put a lot of
15,000
trust
we
in it,
know.
but
Well,
they are actually going to be doing
again,
that for whatever that's
this
worth.
this is why so many people who are not interested in the vaccine are posting this is how many people died of influenza thing, right?
Sure.
Because we literally killed the flu by some magical circumstance.
Oh,
And
it wasn't magic. That's the thing is the basics do work, and we went above and beyond with that. And then if you look at the flu this year, it's making a major comeback, and you want to know why? It's because we've stopped doing as much of what we needed to do to keep things from going that crazy. It might also be that we've also selected for a particularly virulent strain of the flu by
even if,
washing it
well,
with so many of these mitigation strategies.
even if that were the case, then what you would have
Sure.
is the states that either didn't lock down or didn't instigate any of these mitigation strategies having an at least comparable amount of the flu. But that's not what we saw, right?
Well, see, when
What
you
we
say
saw.
the lockdown as a difference here, you have to consider compliance as part of the lockdown uh,
Oh, wait a minute.
umbrella.
We can't suddenly be throwing
Were
in.
they compliant? Were they compliant or not? That's a big question.
We can't suddenly. Well, so it shouldn't matter, right? States that either didn't lock down or had no compliance or whatever should all be in the same boat. They should have had roughly the same amount of influenza, and they didn't.
Well, you also have to look at population density. That's a major determining factor.
Where is that going to take somewhat rural lockdown state and make it have well again
Oh,
it doesn't
that
matter.
extreme is not going to be the one to look for. But if you're going to be looking for whether or not a state had, so if you had a state that had lockdowns, like say California, um, LA is a very big city.
Yes.
A lot of LA didn't give a flying crap about what they were being told to do. They had to go to work to pay for food.
Wait a minute. Did the compliance with lockdowns kill the amount of influenza because people were complying, or did it not kill the amount of influenza in the
Well, you have
numbers
to look at
they
the difference in the way the disease was propagated.
which we are.
So
huge
influenza's basic reproduction number, its R naught, if you will, the R0 number, is substantially lower than that of COVID. It just is. So it is less virulent, less transmissible disease. So there is that gap there that does exist. I'm not saying it. This is not saying that it does. This is what happened. I'm saying this is the route by which it could happen.
Well, see, this is the problem: is that there is some hypothetical capability of that, but
right, but it's got to remain hypothetical. There's not a way to study this at this point.
Not to just evolve this to the literal meme. We eliminated. What is the implication of that statement? That literally everyone on Earth
died of the flu. People were still dying of the flu.
We're back to statistical zero, if not actual zero, though. Right? The CDC's numbers for who died of the flu in 2020 is like in the hundreds of people. Not hundreds of thousands, the hundreds. And I'd give you newer numbers, but they're the CDC and they're slow. Yeah, I can hear you. Oh.
Just one moment here, and I'll go through and look at the numbers for you.
Sure.
So the seasons unfortunately they don't line up with years because that would be convenient.
Yeah, it would.
But so obviously these are preliminary numbers, not finalized. 2019 and 2020, and I'll throw this website on the chat for you. It's at the bottom of this big table, right in the middle of the page.
Yeah.
So you have the symptomatic illness, medical visits, hospitalizations, deaths. So if we look at the deaths from year to year, 2019 through 2020 was still pretty bad. So we have to look at the estimate for a season has a lag. It's not. It doesn't happen like you don't know the numbers the next year. It takes a couple of years to compile the data.
So hold on.
Stupid. That's the way it is.
No, I get what they're doing, right? And here
and keep in mind this includes late 2019 as well as the beginning of 2020.
Herein lies the problem, right? And look, if you're going to rightly tell me, and you are right to say so, that look, these numbers will be adjusted over time because, not everybody who dies.
What they are now, but
not everybody who dies gets, is listed as dying of the flu, even though we know reasonably that they did or would have. The implication
it's not that they're not listed. It's that the causes that could contribute to death are not ranked when they're just listed on the form at autopsy. You have these are the things that were wrong when we looked at the body now.
You're saying the same thing.
Well, just say when you add these things together, like there's not you're not going to have like this is the chief cause of death thrown at the top of the list necessarily.
No. However, right? Again, there are times.
It's just for clarification. Again, at this point.
Again, the guy with 4 bullets in his chest that got listed as dying of COVID.
Sure.
I don't care what happened. We never list that guy as dying from the flu.
So I would caution it on this. How is it that you came to the information that he died because of COVID? Was it a journalist giving a headline? Or was it the form that said from COVID?
The family published his death certificate that said he was listed as a COVID death and then linked his listing in the state database that they reported to the feds that said this patient died of COVID. He died of 4 gunshot wounds to the chest. Right. I mean, and it is effectively indisputable.
There was the statement. There's a statement that was widely popularized in social media, rightly so, I would say, that said died with COVID, and people were saying, well, how is this different from died from COVID? And I'd say that the answer is pretty straightforward. It's everything starts off as died with blank until someone assigns blame later on from doing
autopsy or whatever,
analysis.
I guess.
Right.
Well, after autopsy, the autopsy lists what they died with. The MMR or whatever comes after that. The morbidity and mortality reporting is what assigns blame, basically.
So herein you come to a different problem because died with has been treated a lot different with COVID than it
Well,
has with
died with
everything
is what
else.
is listed on autopsy. That's my point that I was getting to earlier.
Right.
Was with is a very much larger space than from, and
It,
it should be.
well,
That's
yeah.
been
I mean,
confused often. That has been
look,
confused a lot because that comes first and very easily for statistics to
yeah,
get a hold of. That's
and
what came first, and people were assigning from to that. And while you
well,
could say that for the most part from was
it,
valid, things like the gunshots are not.
certainly, but a lot of the problem that you end up with there is that people who died with versus from are not being differentiated in any real way. And my problem with this came when COVID's average age of death exceeded average age of death in any given country that it was in, right? So if you
Fair
come
enough.
to me and you say, I'm going
Well,
to
you should
exaggerate
expect
a little.
that for any cause of death that impacts the population disproportionately in a bias towards with
Sure.
age, which
Well,
any infectious
yeah,
disease will. I would say
th-
that there's
again,
a general trend that you could almost say is universal that infectious disease
oh
will
yeah,
follow the amortization. What was it? It's the
you
whatever
seem
the
to be
hell that
looking for
the
the
bathtub
Pareto
curve.
distribution.
No, it's a bathtub curve, the amortization curve.
Yeah.
So you have the failures early on, so infant mortality, which we have drastically reduced as a species, let alone in the country. And then you have longevity failures, so you have people who die of old age. So
Right.
at the very beginning, you have a drop off. We've worked on that as a species very, very well.
Well,
That's
hold
what
on,
actually dragged our average age down to like 35, even though
because
people were dying routinely at 65.
again, though, hold on, because if your average age, as Italy was the first sign of this, because it was the first
Sure.
place we really had data, right? I mean, look, okay,
Right.
something that the Chinese called data emerged, but I don't believe that for a minute.
We can all agree that the data out of Wuhan is entirely questionable.
It was
Right.
laughable, is what it
And
was.
and so the Italians are where we get the first grouping of this, right? And by the time that they were even having all of this, we need to go run around and worry about this. Their average age of death was already, their average age of COVID death was already exceeding their average age of death, right? And not
But
by
you
a
also
little
have to
bit.
keep
It
in
was like
mind that the average age in Italy is already old. About a quarter of the
oh,
population is geriatric.
that doesn't
So
matter at all if you're comparing average age to average age here, right?
right. So
Because
the point here is that if you have infectious disease, infectious disease basically will hit a population the same way the bathtub curve does.
sure,
So the very, very young, who we are much more protective about these days, so we can skip that half. And then you have the very old. No. And
sure.
you should expect to see that we will have
Well, no,
that kind
I
of bias,
agree.
and you should expect to see a higher age of death for almost any infectious disease, a higher average age of death
Oh,
because of that.
absolutely. I mean,
So when you put
in
I mean,
this,
it's an interesting stat to look at, and it
well,
does highlight an important thing, which is that
it's
older people
not
are more susceptible.
it's not just an interesting stat to look at. It is incredibly relevant, right? Because if you're once you're talking about particularly old age, you at bare minimum you're dying with a boatload of diseases, right?
Sure.
And unless you've been living in a clean room for the last like decade, then you're not. But if that's the case, then I mean, and it most certainly is, right? You know, you see the grandkids, you get a cold, and sometimes grandma dies. That's unironically true every day of every year, forever in all of human history.
Yeah.
Well, except when our average age was 35, because then grandma was,
Well, no, that's the
36.
thing. That is the misleading statistic I was getting to early on when I mentioned the bathtub curve.
Yeah, kind of the trick of
The
it. When
average
you've got
age,
so many
the average
young
age
people
was
dying so young, it kind of pulls the
yeah.
numbers down.
Once you hit about age 5 to 10, you're pretty well good until age 65.
Yeah, right.
And so it
And
just happens. It happens that we had a hell of a lot more infant mortality at that time, so the average age was dragged way down. It was a bimodal distribution, the same way
yeah,
it is now. But we've gotten rid of one of those peaks almost entirely. Our infant mortality rate is so damn low relative to
comparatively
early
speaking,
on in our history.
right.
So
Um,
35, the ripe old age of 35 thing was a meme for
Indeed.
centuries because you had all these old people saying it.
hmm But again,
Yeah,
the jokes aside of
right.
apparently horrifically bad taste, But what you end up with
You haven't
is,
seen my dead baby threads on Twitter then.
oh man, we should get to know each other better. What I'm saying here though is that, and this is going to sound a little bit terse, if the average age of death for your disease is 5 to 10 years, and at any given point that is what COVID has become, right? After you had a reasonable sized data set of deaths, even with COVID, the average age of death is 5 to 10 years above whatever your average age of death in the country is. Then you run into this problem where, look, again, going to sound terse, but these people are going to die anyway. And the problem,
I get the point.
When you see the plummeting influenza numbers and the attributed to COVID numbers, what you are getting as an output is these people who were going to die anyway died with a financial incentive to call it COVID. And no matter, and again, from the standpoint of, of the beginning, 2.2 million people were supposed to be dead 2 years ago, which I understand. I'm not accusing you of supporting that because no one should have supported that, but we did. But you end up with this problem where, look, this isn't that bad, right? No matter how you calculate COVID statistics, they're just not that bad. And there's not a feasible way for them to be. And equally speaking, California, in its infinite wisdom, went back and decided that COVID had been in the United States at least since the November of the prior year. And so if it was as virulent and deadly, as it's implied to be, we should all be dead, statistically.
Well, see, here's the thing: is the prevalence of disease in community. That's an important factor. So not everybody has it at the same time or has it at all right now.
Early.
So there's a certain number of active cases that are going around.
Mm-hmm.
You have so actually one of the things that we should be very happy about right now is the hospitalization death rates are going down per case. So there's a divergence. There's a divergence in cases and versus hospitalization and death, and that there's a variety of factors going into that. Would have to spend all night going into if we were going to try to.
I mean, we could.
Actually, we can't. I've got a show in 20 minutes.
I will agree that it's a lot of things for the sake of shows in 20 minutes.
I mean, if you look at people like to try and get to an IFR and use that as a hard number, and it's just not feasible.
No, that's not really how it works.
CFR is the one that is hard data that you can use as a retrospective, and you can, given some chicanery going on with some of the things, like 4 bullets to the chest causing COVID somehow, I would say that you have to also, you can't just run into that with one side of it. You also have to look at the people who are not listed as COVID deaths, or were not tested at all, or were just presumed to have death of whatever variety. Again, an MMR is what boils down for the cause of death labeling.
That might have been a feasible suggestion for
but there's
10 days in 2020, right? Because at this point, it is, we know that effectively everybody who dies, right, to an unreasonably certain amount compared to any other disease, effectively everybody who dies gets COVID test. Right. I mean, is that agreeable?
Nowadays, right now, I would say yes. If you're talking about in 2020, no.
In January 2020, no. But you see these.
Well, no, in January 2020, so let me put it like this: the resources required to have done that throughout 2020 did not exist.
Towards the end of 2020, you start to see it basically everywhere, right? And I will grant you.
It's still no. Here's the thing: it's still. In 2021, we have the same problem. It largely depends on how many people are getting sick and how many of those resources are required in different places. This winter, so there's over New Year's, the 20. So I know people who are involved in this part of things. Can't name names right now, unfortunately, just the way it is. I would say take this with a grain of salt. I trust but verify absolutely. But I can tell you from my experience here, the hospitals ran out of in some cities where I know people are at, ran out of the media resources, so the reagents, the
Yeah.
chemicals required to get the job done for PCR, and also ran out of lateral flow tests. So it largely depends on how bad the pandemic is at the time, how bad the outbreak is, how many people are sick, as to whether or not everybody can get tested. Surveillance happens at about a 1 in 4 rate, and that is a huge resource drain that happens on the CDC side of things.
Hold on a
So
minute.
surveillance is checking out which variant it is, let alone whether or not they have COVID.
You're talking about two different things, right?
So what they just yesterday, no, not even yesterday. Tomorrow. Tomorrow is when a couple of these hospitals are going to get more media for PCR to be able to even have that as a backup to missing lateral flow tests.
Again, you're still talking about two different things, right? Because
well, when you say you test every single corpse, it doesn't happen like that because the live patients come first. So on that basis alone, there's that issue.
Except, right, that the live patients come first thing is because again, you see where the testing situation runs out.
And I don't want to skip ahead here and screw it up, but if there is a temporal aspect of things where dead patients can sit around longer. There's that.
Well, yes,
but the backlog is so large that it is not reasonable as a cost measure. There are presumed clinical presentations that, I mean, frankly though, if someone comes in with every single sign of COVID, they've got it, so you don't really need a test. You know, if they're coughing out a lung and they can't smell anything and they hate life because all their joints are inflamed, you know, it's possible they've got COVID.
Herein lies the problem. On a completely anecdotal level, am fairly certain at this point I have had COVID twice. However, I've never lost smell. Throughout all of the intervening time,
by the way, it's only about 1 in 3 people, as of my knowledge of 2 years ago, that get that. So it's not like it's the symptom you need to have, but it's one of the classic.
It is a
ones
telltale.
Now.
But yeah,
this is the other problem though. Is go look at the list of COVID symptoms throughout time, and what you will find out is they have included things like hair loss. Now, look, if all the hair falls out of your head,
it's a zebra of a disease. So here's the problem: it is a true zebra of a disease. It has got symptoms of frickin' everything.
Therein lies the problem, right? Because these so many of nothing is as good. No data is good unless you have good definitions, right? You know, the PCR failure test rate was massive, right? Or at least the false positive rate was.
Well,
now,
so I'll say
every
this,
time I say
that was an early on issue that actually dropped off very quickly, and a large part of the reason why there are issues with PCR later on is they were used in populations that they were not scaled for.
Well,
so if you have a small population with a low prevalence, your rate of false positives will be very high because your rate of true positives is so damn low in population.
The
number of false positives is going to stay about the same, but the fraction of true positives is going to fluctuate with the fraction of actual disease in population.
Absolutely. However, that was, to the earlier discussion, that was what R0 was based off of, right? And so this is
tracked it further on, and that estimate was revised early in 2020.
Indeed, it was, right? But again, we are now getting down to, and look, it's still not great. There's still a high likelihood that you're going to get it, all things considered. But we're down to, what is the false positive rate, and how is that affecting things? And the answer to that is that I lived last year, or in 2020 no less, in Amarillo, Texas, who had 2 cases of COVID, and this is where you get things like them locking down the whole city for 2 cases, right? Because it's not a particularly big city. So certainly, but our per 100,000 rate was massive compared to Los Angeles, who had the whole city worth of people testing positive for COVID. Right.
Well, yeah. So again, this is the thing: is I was saying, is that there's a certain rate of failure which is going to be effectively constant in terms of background description of positivity in the population. It's because it operates on snippets of DNA.
Indeed, right? And
it's matching up two different statistical curves and saying what do I need to add together to get to this big one. And
gotcha.
one of those, so the main issue that you have there is because it operates on those snippets, distribution of molecular weights, so to speak here. It doesn't have a single strand that it operates against, and eventually they are designed to operate. The way the PCR test operates is it's designed to get to the point where it gets a false positive, because the distribution just matches from having enough background inside the media.
And a matter of fact, we actually went into a fair degree of depth on this because a lot of where the screwiness came from is that they were running this test iterations on down to get the positive that they wanted.
The reason they take about 18 hours to run is because they have about a 90-minute cycle to do a replication step, and that's, they double the amount of DNA in the pot every time they do that.
Yeah.
And so there's a cutoff after which and so determining when the cutoff is, how many replications to get to the statistical false positive that is guaranteed, like 95% threshold or whatever.
Yeah.
That number of steps to get there, when you can say, okay, if it's not positive by this step, then we can call it a negative test.
That was a very
floppy
number for quite a while.
That was the problem in March of 2020, was we didn't know how many replications we needed to get to, and it's typically tuned so that it's on the order of 10 to 15. So 18 hours you would expect to have a test done. You do it in triplicate, it takes about 72 hours to get a result back to a patient.
Now, fellas,
that's why it takes that long.
I hate to have to do this, but I've got my live show in 13 minutes. So
you do.
So
this has been fun.
It actually has. This has been great. So I'm Evan at That Fake Goddamn. A man here, Craig at CraigBob99, basically everywhere. You can find Don at
Healer Procurement on Twitter, Pleb Media on Getter, 2 Plebs on Gab. I'm really bad at branding.
Oh, no worries. Actually, I got all your stuff. It will be in the links below if anybody wants to follow up.
Man, you should. That's the way to do it. There's a ton of stuff. It's all over the place.
Anyway, has been a pleasure. Look forward to talking to you again. And I'll let you guys chat it out. But I've got to go because I've got to queue up some music for the next 3 hours.
Right.
Do that.
So you guys take it easy. Been an absolute pleasure. Look forward to it again.